It's the Mueller report. We're reading page 155. This is about the meeting in the Seychelles with Erik Prince, Dmitriev, Nader, and Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was apparently there or in the area at the same time, met with them initially. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed in his meetings with Prince for two reasons. First, he believed that the Russians needed to be communicating with someone who had more authority with the incoming administration than Erik Prince had. Second, he had hoped to have a discussion of greater substance, such as outlining a strategic roadmap for both countries to follow. Dmitriev told Nader that, the rest was blocked out by Bill Barr, and then adds, Prince's comments were insulting, and the rest of that is blocked out by Bill Barr. Hours after the second meeting, Prince sent two text messages to Bannon from the Seychelles. As described further below, investigators were unable to obtain the content of these or other messages between Prince and Bannon, and the investigation also did not identify evidence of any further communication between Prince and Dmitriev after their meetings in the Seychelles. Item 3, Erik Prince's meeting with Steve Bannon after the Seychelles trip. After the Seychelles meetings, Prince told Nader that he would inform Bannon about his discussion with Dmitriev and would convey that someone within the Russian power structure was interested in seeking better relations with the incoming administration. On January 12th, 2017, Prince contacted Bannon's personal assistant to set up a meeting for the following week. Several days later, Prince messaged her again asking about Bannon's schedule. Prince said that he met Bannon at Bannon's home upon returning to the United States in mid-January and briefed him about several topics, including his meeting with Dmitriev. Prince told the office, that's the Mueller office, that he explained to Bannon that Dmitriev was the head of a Russian sovereign wealth fund and was interested in improving relations between the United States and Russia. Prince had on his cell phone a screenshot of Dmitriev's Wikipedia page dated January 16, 2017, and Prince told the Mueller office that he likely showed that image to Bannon. Prince also believed he provided Bannon with Dmitriev's contact information. According to Prince, Bannon instructed Prince not to follow up with Dmitriev, and Prince had the impression that the issue was not a priority for Bannon. Prince related that Bannon did not appear angry, just relatively uninterested. Bannon, by contrast, told this office that he never discussed with Prince anything regarding Dmitriev, RDIF, or any meetings with Russian individuals or people associated with Putin. Bannon also stated that Prince mentioned such a meeting, that had Prince mentioned such a meeting, Bannon would have remembered it, and Bannon would have objected to such a meeting having taken place. The conflicting accounts provided by Bannon and Prince could not be independently clarified by reviewing their communications, because neither one was able to produce any of the messages they exchanged in the time period surrounding the Seychelles meeting. Prince's phone contained no text messages prior to March 2017, although provider records indicate that he and Bannon exchanged dozens of messages. Prince denied deleting any messages, but claimed he did not know why there were no messages on his device from before March of 2017. Bannon's devices similarly contained no messages in the relevant time period, and Bannon also stated that he did not know why messages did not appear on his device. Bannon told the office, the Mueller office, that during both the months before and after the Seychelles meeting, he regularly used his personal BlackBerry and personal email for work-related communications, including those with Prince, and he took no steps to preserve those work communications. That, by the way, is a violation of the law that the Republicans are all bent out of shape that they say Hillary violated by deleting emails. D, Kirill Dmitriev's post-election contact with Rick Gerson concerning U.S.-Russia relations. Dmitriev's contacts during the transition period were not limited to those facilitated by Nader. In approximately late November 2016, the UAE National Security Advisor introduced Dmitriev to Rick Gerson, a friend of Jared Kushner, who runs a hedge fund in New York. Gerson stated that he had no formal role in the transition and had no involvement in the Trump campaign other than the occasional casual discussions about the campaign with Kushner. Turning to page 157. After the election, Gerson assisted the transition by arranging meetings for transition officials with former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and a UAE delegation led by Crown Prince Mohammed. Oh, Crown Prince Mohammed, I earlier mentioned, I thought he was Saudi. He must be UAE. When Dmitriev and Gerson met, they principally discussed potential joint ventures between Gerson's hedge fund and RDIF. Dmitriev was interested in improved economic cooperation between the United States and Russia and asked Gerson who he should meet with in the incoming administration who would be helpful toward this goal. Gerson replied that he would try to figure out the best way to arrange appropriate introductions, but noted that confidentiality would be required because of the sensitivity of holding such meetings before the new administration took power and before cabinet nominees could be confirmed by the Senate. Gerson said he would ask Kushner and Michael Flynn who the, quote, key person or people were on the topics of reconciliation with Russia, joint security concerns, and economic matters. Dmitriev told Gerson that he had been tasked by Putin to develop and execute a reconciliation plan between the United States and Russia. He noted in a text message to Gerson that if Russia was, quote, approached with respect and willingness to understand our position, we can have major breakthroughs quickly, end quote. Gerson and Dmitriev exchanged ideas in December 2016 about what such a reconciliation plan would include. Gerson told the office that the transition team had not asked him to engage in these discussions with Dmitriev, and that he did so on his own initiative and as a private citizen. On January 9th, 2017, the same day he asked Nader whether meeting Prince would be worthwhile, Dmitriev sent his biography to Gerson. It's the Mueller Report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Back in Portland, back home, back in the U.S. I was always in the U.S. Actually, Philadelphia is kind of where, it's where the Constitution was written. It was a nice visit to the Netroots Nation Conference. And now we have Donald Trump revealing, I think, what's actually, in some ways, the impact of social media. The United States, I mean, there's like so many different responses, right, possible to Trump's tweeting that people of color should, quote, go back, to the countries that they came from, when in fact, with the exception of Ilhan Omar, they came from countries like Brooklyn. I mean, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's ancestry is Puerto Rican. It's particularly bizarre when you consider that 2 out of 3 Trump wives were not born in the United States. But he's not saying that white people should go back to the countries they came from. He's not suggesting that Melania should go back to the country she came from, or that her parents, who were recently naturalized, should go back to the country they came from, or that his son Barron, who is a first-generation descendant of an immigrant, his wife Melania, should go back to the country he came from. I mean, it's just, which is bizarre. So how does this come about? Well, in my opinion, America has always been essentially a racist country. We've had this melting pot story that we told ourselves, and we've really tried to embrace it in some ways over the years, and then sometimes we've really pulled back from that. In fact, most of the time we've kind of pulled back from it and really seen America more as an apartheid nation. Particularly, I mean, look at what we did with Native Americans. After slaughtering 50 to 100 million of them, we herded them into reservations and said, you stay there. And up until the 1950s, certainly with our public school system, actually until the 1960s, that's what we were doing with African Americans. And frankly, we're back to it. But until recently, the overt racism in the modern era, now, let's acknowledge, President Wilson, I think it was 1913, he did the first showing of Birth of a Nation in the White House. Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat. And Birth of a Nation was a recruiting film for the Klan. You can watch it online. It's pretty shocking that a president of the United States would preview this movie in the White House. So, we have this, these deep racist roots in this country. But at least since the 1950s or 60s, basically, in my lifetime and yours, however old you are, that was like, that's the past. And this is the present. We're trying to move forward, and we're trying to actually make America a great melting pot and fulfill the ideal that is, on the base of the Statue of Liberty. Send me your huddled masses. You're tired. You're poor. Yearning to breathe free. And we didn't basically discuss in polite company, and I put that in quotes, our racism. I'm not talking about so much our personal racism, although that wasn't discussed in polite company either, but even the conversation about racism in the United States. But what's happened now, and I think that social media has a lot to do with this, is that it has created a kind of hive mind. Now, there's actually a history to this. I mean, if you go back before Gutenberg and the printing press, there was very little kind of national consensus anywhere about anything. And then books started getting published, and so people started sharing ideas with each other, and the hive mind started forming beyond just local clans and communities and tribes and families and things like that. And then the newspaper, that was in as I recall, 1500s, 1560, I think it was, Gutenberg. And then, about 100 years later, printing press technology got pretty good, maybe 150 years later, and we started having newspapers, and that expanded the hive mind, so everybody in the city could read, what the thought leaders said. And then in the 1920s, we got radio, and that expanded the hive mind. And then in the 1950s, we got television, and that expanded the hive mind. But it was always done in a way that had a certain patina glaze over the top of it of respectability and of, looking down on racism as kind of lower class, as just, you don't talk about that in polite company, as I said earlier. But what has happened with the hive mind that has been created by social media is that immediately all this stuff, particularly social media that allows anonymity, is that social media now has brought out the racists, put them front and center, and you add to that the algorithms that social media uses and search engines use to feed you more of what you yourself have said. And so the racist who says something racist suddenly discovers that he's got, 1,000 other racists who are good buddies. And they start talking with each other and hanging out with each other, and it gets more and more open. And pretty soon you've got, the phenomena of these various white nationalist, white supremacist groups out marching in the streets. And I think, frankly, that it makes it look like the racism that is out there is actually bigger than it is, or maybe it is this big. But my concern is that by amplifying it this way, having social media amplify these kinds of sentiments, particularly coming from anonymous people, that causes the unconverted, that is, the people who are sitting around going, who have never really considered themselves racists or non-racists. And by the way, this doesn't just apply to racism. This applies to homophobia and the whole anti-LGBT perspective. I think homophobia is still an umbrella word that encompasses all of that. It applies to religious bigotry. It applies to just the nativism. I mean, this whole spectrum of stuff, right? Misogyny. and the whole spectrum of bigots, it provides them with this platform for hate speech that grows. And so Trump steps into this space and says, look at this, I got 50 million followers, and he looks at that and realizes that he can make flat out racist statements. Go back to where you came from. Most black people, most Hispanic people in the United States, most Asian people in the United States report, and there's now some actually good reporting coming out about this. Actually, there have been several of them just in the last 24 hours. ProPublica just did a fascinating one. In fact, they did a long tweet about it, and I retweeted it saying this thread is really worth reading. Finding that it's a very, very common experience among people of color, right across the spectrum, Asian, Hispanic, African American, to be told by white people, go back to where you came from, or go back to Africa, or go back to Mexico, or go back to China or whatever, and it's kids in school. I mean, it's thrown around as a slur. So when Trump said this, he knew exactly what he was saying. He's been talking like this, obviously, ever since his father was refusing to rent housing to African Americans, or broadly to people of color, in the Queens or Bronx or Brooklyn or wherever he came from. I guess it was the whatever. And here we are. And now Trump is saying today that the women of color that he trashed, saying that they should go back to the S-hole countries they came from, now he is tweeting this morning that they are the racists. Right? So not only is he making it okay for racist speech, but I mentioned the unconverted before. When he starts talking about countries run by people of color not working or being dysfunctional, I mean, I think most people understand that there are reasons why that is so often the case, and those reasons have to do with colonialism and racism. Not, any bell curve stuff about inherent inferiority or superiority. But for somebody who's not well informed, for your typical junior high school kid or your typical, low information voter, this stuff starts having an impact. And they start hearing this kind of rhetoric that Trump is using and thinking, maybe there's something to this. And pretty soon they're out there on the streets chanting, go home, to people whose ancestors probably came to the United States unwillingly in slave ships, 200 years before their own ancestors, the white people saying go homes. I mean, Trump is only, his grandfather came to this country in the late 1800s to start a brothel up on the West Coast. So this is how this is happening. Edmund Burke is often quoted as saying that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men, was the phrase he used back then, to do nothing. And, where is, Mitt Romney's cousin, who, Ronna Romney McDaniel, who runs the Republican National Committee, the head of the RNC, she has not said a word. Where are the members of the Republican Party? None of them have said a word. The closest anybody got was, one senator on Sunday TV saying, well, Trump should really aim higher. Right? Good old Lindsey Graham. But that was it. He was one senator. I mean, this is just like the Republicans are completely mute about this. And I don't think it's because they're embarrassed. I think it's because they think that this is an electoral strategy that might win. And it might win big majorities for them in the House and the Senate as well as the White House. I really think that they're starting to buy into this belief that Trump has, that to hell with the middle, don't need the middle. The middle is, as Jim Hightower said, the only thing in the middle of the road are dead armadillos and yellow stripes. To hell with the middle. The base, about half of all Republican and Democratic base voters don't vote. So if you can get your base out, you can win elections.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So, has the Republican base in Fox News moved so far to the right that this actually is a winning strategy for Trump? What do you think? And welcome back. Let's see here. Bob in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks for getting to me. Hey, I just want to carry on with your discussion here, and I want to bring up faith-based perception versus knowledge-based perception as one of the keys to understanding why this is all continuing to go on and on and on. Where are the good men? I agree with what Edmund Burke said. One of my college teachers had a poster on his office door that had that quote on it, and I'll never forget it, and I agree with it.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of good men are tied up making money. That's my experience in talking with people through my adult life, is that people are so busy trying to make money, they're so concerned about money. And
no, I get that, and I think that's one of the sources for low information voters, low information. But Bob, do you think that racism in the United States is so deeply ingrained in the white community that, and you know, whites are about 70% of Americans, and they're more than 70% of the American electorate. Do you think that it's so deeply ingrained that explicit, overt racism is a winning electoral strategy for Donald Trump and the Republican Party?
I wouldn't think so. I think it's more complicated than that.
How so?
Well, I think there's a lot that's not being discussed in terms of corporate power and how the media frames up the discussions we're having, and what's constantly repeated over and over and over again by so-called liberals. I've heard a lot of people talking, and I see a lot of people who I think are liberals who aren't really talking in liberal frameworks. They've been hijacked because they're concerned that what they say is going to make them lose their job or lose their reputation amongst the people who are moneyed and powerful. And as long as people are concerned with that, they're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. Thank you, Bob. Wow. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Paul in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Thank you so much, first of all, for taking my call. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
I know this is off the topic of what you were talking about, but I would like to ask you a question, if I may. I would like to know why the Democratic Congress is not pressing to get Trump's New York State tax returns when New York State has literally offered them up on a silver platter. And I also have one other point, and I'll let you respond. I would like to know why they let the Mueller testimony be delayed by 1 week just to get one more hour in front of each committee. What was the reason for that?
I think the reason was to get one more hour, and with regard to the tax returns, that's not our topic this hour right now, Paul. We'll talk about that. Give me a call on Friday, or a week from Friday. Actually, people get one call a week. Like I said, I'd rather stay on topic here. I'd rather keep these lines available to people who want to talk about the topics that we're talking about. We'll be right back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back. We're live, broadcasting live from Portland, Oregon. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Axios noting one influential Democrat told me Trump had achieved a tactical win, stoking his own base and the Democrats' internal tension. Quote, his view is that he simply cannot go too far. That line doesn't exist. A Trump ally said he believes the more he puts the squad front and center, the better his reelection chances get. The squad, of course, being 4 women, bing for the misogynists, of color, bing for the racists, one of whom is an immigrant, bing for the nativists. And this is at the same time that the Democratic Party is, or many voices in the Democratic Party, are talking about things that really crank the freakout factor among Trump's base, among the white racist base. And once again, keep in mind, about 40% of the electorate of registered voters are Democrats, and about 40% are Republicans, and about 20%. It's actually slightly less than that. It's in the 30s, but you get the point. And then there's this 20% in the middle who don't identify. They call themselves independents. But of that 40% base, about half of them don't vote in most elections. So you have a choice. You can turn out your base, or you can go for the people in the middle to get elected. And the Republicans have been running base strategies. We had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. The Republicans have been running base strategies since Reagan, and the Democrats have been running centrist strategies since Clinton. And it's working out well for the Republicans and not well for the Democrats. So now the Democrats are starting to move toward their base. And, a good chunk of the Democratic base the Democratic base made up of white people who actually understand the ideals and notions of this country and believe in a pluralistic society. And here's the problem, right? You use polysyllabic words like pluralistic, and you lose the Trump voters, right? From the get-go. But in any case, let's say reasonable white voters, African Americans, particularly African American women, show up to vote in large numbers. Now, to an extent, those numbers may be skewed because racist policing has incarcerated so many African American men that in many states they simply can't vote. But in any case, African Americans, Hispanics, although most Hispanics are Catholic and many of them are relatively conservative when it comes to social issues, things like gay rights and abortion rights. And so the Republican Party is like trying to reach out to them. And so the bottom line is, right now, as Democrats are speaking more and more about, we need to protect the rights of immigrants. Today, the Trump administration changed the rules for who can, appeal for asylum in the United States. And if you go to a country that you're fleeing from, if you go to another country before you come to the United States, in other words, if you leave Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and go to Mexico, then you can no longer apply for asylum in the United States. You have to stop first in the United States. Otherwise, you have to apply for asylum in Mexico. This is the new rule that Trump just put into place. It's literally going into effect today or tomorrow. And it's going to eliminate, all these asylum seekers. So as the Democrats are talking about asylum and featuring, women of color, the squad, and people of color in general, and having a diverse, male and female diversity as well, set up, the Republicans are going all white male all the time. Will it work for them?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
At its core, is the United States electorate, or at least the white people in America, genuinely so racist that this strategy of Donald Trump's will work? It's the Mueller report. We're reading from page 107. This is about the CNI and Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions' post-speech interaction with CNI is the subtitle here. In the summer of 2016, CNI organized at least 2 dinners in Washington, D.C. for Sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. The dinners included CNI-affiliated individuals such as Richard Burt and Zalmay Khalilzad, a former U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan and Iraq, and the person who had introduced Trump before the April 27, 2016 foreign policy speech, page 108. Khalilzad also met with Sessions one-on-one separately from the dinners. At the dinners and in the meetings, the participants addressed U.S. relations with Russia, including how U.S. relations with NATO and European countries affected U.S. policy toward Russia. But the discussions were not exclusively focused on Russia. Khalil Azad, for example, recalled discussing nation-building and violent extremism with Sessions. In addition, Sessions asked Saunders of CNI to draft 2 memoranda not specific to Russia, one on Hillary Clinton's foreign policy shortcomings and another on Egypt. Item D, Jared Kushner's continuing contacts with Symes. Between the April 2016 speech at the Mayflower Hotel and the presidential election, Jared Kushner had periodic contacts with Symes. Those contacts consisted of both in-person meetings and phone conversations, which concerned how to address issues relating to Russia in the campaign and how to move forward with the advisory group of foreign policy experts that Symes had proposed. Symes recalled that he, not Kushner, initiated all conversations about Russia, and that Kushner never asked him to set up back-channel conversations with Russians. According to Symes, after the Mayflower speech in late April, Symes raised the issue of Russian contacts with Kushner, advised that it would be bad optics for the campaign to develop hidden Russia contacts, and told Kushner that the campaign should not highlight Russia as an issue and should handle any contacts with the Russians with care. Kushner generally provided a similar account of his interaction with Symes. Among the Kushner-Symes meetings was one held on August 7, 2016, at Symes' request in Kushner's New York office. The meeting was to address foreign policy advice that CNI was providing and how to respond to the Clinton campaign's Russia-related attacks on candidate Trump. Page 109. In advance of the meeting, Symes sent Kushner a Russia policy memo laying out what Mr. Trump may want to say about Russia. In a cover email transmitting that memo and a phone call to set up the meeting, Symes mentioned, quote, a well-documented story of highly questionable connections between Bill Clinton and the Russian government, parts of which, according to Symes, had even been discussed with the CIA and the FBI in the late 1990s and shared with the independent counsel at the end of the Clinton presidency, end quote. Kushner forwarded the email to senior Trump campaign officials Stephen Miller, Paul Manafort, and Rick Gates with the note, suggestion only. Manafort subsequently forwarded the email to his assistant and scheduled a meeting with Symes. Manafort was on the verge of leading the campaign by the time of the scheduled meeting with Symes, and Symes ended up meeting only with Kushner. During the August 17 meeting, Symes provided Kushner the Clinton-related information that he had promised. Symes told Kushner that, and then the rest of that is redacted by Bill Barr. Symes claimed that he had received this information from former CIA and Reagan White House official Fritz Ermarth, who claimed to have learned it from U.S. intelligence sources, not from Russians. Symes perceived that Kushner did not find the information to be of interest or use to the campaign because it was, in Symes' words, old news. When interviewed by the Special Prosecutor's Office, Kushner stated that he believed that there was little chance of something new being revealed about the Clintons given their long career as public officials, and that he never received from Symes information that could be operationalized for the Trump campaign. Despite Kushner's reaction, Symes believed that he provided the same information at a small group meeting of foreign policy experts that CNI organized for Sessions. Number 5, June 9th, we're now on page 110. June 9th, 2016 meeting at Trump Tower. On June 9th, 2016, senior representatives of the Trump campaign met in Trump Tower with a Russian attorney expecting to receive derogatory information about Hillary Clinton from the Russian government. The meeting was proposed to Donald Trump Jr. in an email from Robert Gladstone at the request of his then-client Emin Agalarov, the son of Russian real estate developer Aras Agalarov. Goldstone relayed to Trump Jr. that the Crown, quote, the Crown Prosecutor of Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia as part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, end quote. Trump Jr. immediately responded, quote, if it's what you say, I love it, close quote, and arranged the meeting through a series of emails and telephone calls. Trump Jr. invited campaign chairman Paul Manafort and senior advisor Jared Kushner to attend the meeting, and both attended. Members of the Trump campaign discussed the meeting before it occurred, and Michael Cohen recalled that Trump Jr. might have told candidate Trump about an upcoming meeting to receive adverse information about Clinton without linking the meeting to Russia. According to written answers submitted by President Trump, he had no recollection of learning of the meeting at the time, and the office found no documentary evidence showing that he was made aware of the meeting or its Russian connection before it occurred. The Russian attorney who spoke at the meeting, Natalia Veselnitskaya, had previously worked for the Russian government and maintained a relationship with that government throughout this period of time. She claimed that funds, it's the Mueller report, page 110. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Some Twitter responses. Speaking of the hive mind, on my question, PJ Doucette says, yes, Tom, the U.S. is that racist. It makes me so sad to say it, too. Ricardo Minami points out, he says, Tom, keep in mind that the Dems haven't won the white vote majority since the 1960s civil rights laws, which I don't know if that's exactly true, but I know it has, it certainly was true in the last election. And probably is true. This is what Lyndon Johnson worried about. This is, Bill Moyers has told that story more than once. Ed Mayfield says the melting pot has always considered just how dark your skin was before letting you into the boil. I'd say before deciding whether or not to let you into the boil. And Terry Halstead asked the question, anyone else starting to see an uptake in tweet insults toward progressives? Trump's media summit must have unleashed the herd of 300-pound guys in basements. Watch for bot behavior and report them. Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. So let's pick up your phone calls here and get into this. Will in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Will, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. The short answer to your question, is like that Twitter when you just said, is this a strategy sufficient to get the Republicans elected? Duh. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's easy. But I think an important thing to talk about related to this is, as hard and extreme as it may sound, I really think that people that are are sickened by racism, we need to banish Republicans from our circle of life. And that includes family. And as hard as awful as that sounds, I don't think we have any choice, because we need to tell them very explicitly, you are not welcome in my life anymore. I'm not going to aid in your hate of this and destruction of this country. I just can't do it anymore, and walk away and let them think it over. And I know it's hard. It's real hard. But I have actually done this, and my wife and I have done this, and we just can't do this anymore because they're making us sick. And are making our country sick. So anyway, that's fine.
Well, your two statements, though, Will, are contradictory. You said, will racism help Republicans get elected? Yes. And then essentially what you said was, will the Republican racism produce a strong backlash on the Democratic side that might prevent Republicans from getting elected because it's so strong that a lot of people will show up to vote? I realize you didn't say it like that. In fact, you didn't even come close to saying that. But you said in your personal life you're willing to push out Republicans. That says to me that you're cranked up enough that you'll probably vote. And so, there's kind of two sides to this question. Is Trump's racism and the entire Republican Party's tacit support of it, in the Burkean, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to say nothing or do nothing. Is Trump's racism going to get him elected on the one hand, or on the other hand, is Trump's racism going to cause people who are opposed, and not just racism, misogyny, bigotry, let's say, broadly, or is that going to cause enough people like you and me, well, probably you and I have always voted, but, people of our broad perspective who typically don't vote to get energized and cranked up and show up and vote? In other words, might this actually be a strategy that locks him into a little tiny base that is going to guarantee huge losses for the Republican Party in 2020?
I think that's a question that hasn't been really thoroughly tested yet, and I think we need to test it. We need to finally find out if this country can be saved.
Well, we'll find out in 15 or 16 months. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
it's scary. Really scary.
Yeah, Will, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. Brent in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, Brent, what's up?
How you doing? I just started listening to your show not that long ago. My aunt turned me on to you, and I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
I would
thank your
to
aunt.
Speak on. I will. What I think that racism definitely helped get him elected, but everyone also overlooks the fact that Clinton didn't campaign in 3 states, and I think in Michigan she lost by an average of 3 votes in each precinct. So, I would hope that moving forward, that it definitely equivocates to a loss for the Republican Party, to where it's like, oh, wow, like they can't win an election anymore. But
2016 kind of implies that with the Democratic wins, but the Republicans did hold the Senate.
Yeah, and hopefully moving forward, like a lot of Republicans are starting to walk away again. And if to speak on racism, are you familiar with Jane Elliott?
Boy, that name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure why.
She's an educator. She's an older white lady with short hair, and what she does is she usually does an exercise where she separates people by eye color.
Oh, those studies happened in the 60s, the original set of studies on that. And
yeah,
where they told the kids that blue eyes were superior or brown eyes were superior, and et cetera. And suddenly social orders in the classroom literally changed. And when they were done with their little experiment, they couldn't unchange many of them.
Yes, and I think that it's easy to invoke the racism demon, if you will. You know, like it, and I believe I have a really good solution to it. Not very many people listen to it, but if we want this country to be better and move forward and progress like we all want it to, you got to start teaching critical thinking in junior high and carry it out through high school, so that the vast majority of Americans aren't exposed to critical thinking if they choose to take that class in college.
Yeah. I think, frankly, you can teach critical thinking to anybody probably over 9 or 10 years old. Maybe it should start in 4th or 5th grade rather than in high school.
Junior high.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
A lot of pushback I get on it is like, how are you going to teach kids these complex things? And it's like, well, you don't teach them the complex things at first. You just teach them what a fallacy is, so that they can recognize, a logical fallacy when they hear it.
Right.
And
exactly.
our voting system is a logical fallacy for the most part, either A or B. It would be nice if we had maybe 4 parties or 5 parties, and there was a little bit more choice.
Unfortunately, what is necessary to make that happen would be, either proportional representation, which require a change in the Constitution, or instant runoff voting, which is something that both the parties don't like, because that'll bring 3rd and 4th parties in. But and that's a whole other conversation. But Brent, thank you. Your thoughts are, well considered, and I appreciate them. Thank you. Leonard in South Pasadena, California. Hey, Leonard, what's up? Leonard? No, Leonard. Okay, let's try Kenyatta in Redlands, California. Hey, Kenyatta, how you doing today?
I am fine, Mr. Hartman, and I'm about halfway through the history of guns in America. It is fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any of your listeners that haven't read it are doing themselves a great disservice by not. No, you didn't pay me to say that. So
there you go.
I want to talk about Mr. Trump's comments, and more specifically your question. I got a lot to say, and I know there's limited time, so I'm going to speak fast. First of all, when you talk about is Mr. Trump's racism going to get him reelected, his racism got him elected in the first place. Let's not lose sight of that first. Secondly, his Gevalt campaign, and that's G-E-V-A-L-T, which is very similar to what Benjamin Netanyahu did in Israel earlier this year, has started in earnest. And
hang on just a second. Gevalt. This is a word I've never heard before. Or is it a noun, or what is Gevalt?
Yeah, it's a noun. It's G-E-V-A-L-T. It's also it can also be spelled G-E-V-A-L-D.
And what does it mean?
It basically means where a political figure is demonizing another group in order to be elected. Right. And there are variations on this. You've often talked about the Southern strategy.
Sure.
This is a similar thing. You cannot listen, Tom. There is a lot of people don't realize that the Star Spangled Banner has a third verse that very few people know, that basically glorifies the death of slaves.
Yep.
There are the Statue of Liberty. On her right foot, there is a chain that is literally hidden under the draperies. It's a broken shackle that lies at the statue's right foot, and it disappears beneath the draperies only to reappear at the front of her left foot, the end link broken. As a result, the statue was not a symbol of democratic government or Enlightenment ideals for African Americans, but rather a source of pain. This is what this country is. Yeah. That's what this is. And Donald Trump knows how sexy it is to the people that vote for him. And I got to tell you something. I hope it doesn't happen, but I am girding my loins for a second Donald Trump term, and he's going to really go nuts then, because that's why he stacked the Supreme Court the way he has. I want to say one more thing. I have heard all day long political pundits talking about Donald Trump is dividing the country. Donald Trump is not dividing the country. I am so sick of hearing this. Donald Trump is a reflection of this country, and if this country doesn't like what it sees, they need to throw his ass out. And that's not going to happen, because that's how he got there in the first place. You can't sell hamburgers to people that don't like hamburgers, and I'm done.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right, Kenyatta. And I think that what Donald Trump is showing, I don't think he's a reflection of the country, but he's a reflection of probably at least half of the white electorate. And
Tom, do you realize that everyone talks about Barack Obama, and a lot of people like to take credit for that, but you do realize that Barack Obama got less than half of the white vote. You do realize that? I know,
as did Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Yeah. Kenyatta, thank you. Always good to hear from you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And I learned a new word today. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your thoughts on all this right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And what role do you think that the hive mind is playing in this? I haven't seen anybody, wanting to specifically reference social media. And welcome back. John in Los Angeles, listening on KPFK. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
The last caller, he hit it right on the head. I mean, in a lot of ways, I hate to tell you this, but yeah, Trump, unfortunately, he might get elected. I'm about 70% sure that he's going to get elected, because as a black man in America that has been disenfranchised and has been that way for an awfully long time, I've watched this country and realized that the biblical saying is true. Those who build their house on a lie, their house will surely fall. This country was built on a lie. The lie of the Revolutionary War, all about getting away from taxes and whatnot. No. This whole thing was built off of racism and genocide. And once it comes to grips with that, maybe changes will happen. But until it looks at the mirror at itself, this is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And
John, and feel free to tell me it's none of my business. A personal question. I'm wondering if you've ever been told by a white person to go back to Africa. Is that in your experience, is that a common comment that is directed at people of color?
Brother, I've been told to go back to Africa. I've been told to go, not only to go back to Africa, I've been called monkey. Someone threw a noose at me once.
God.
I mean, I've been accosted by the police. And the only thing that saved my life was this white Jewish guy had his phone out and he was incidentally talking to his lawyer about how they had me not on the hood of the car, almost on the roof of the car.
Wow.
And that's here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
When that happened.
Yeah. John, thank you. Thank you for your perspective, and thanks for sharing your story. It's
no problem.
I appreciate it. Karen in Sandstone, Minnesota. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Tom. We were talking about voting, and the other day I thought, how can we protect our vote, especially in states that don't have backup ballots?
Yeah, Karen, this is not the topic we're talking about right now. I'd be glad to discuss that with you on a day that we do, or on Anything Goes Friday. So, Jared in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's up?
Hello, Tom. And yes, I agree with your first caller that we need to be more outspoken as progressives against, this regime we're living under. But on the topic of racism in the United States, I would say that we have always been a racist country per se, but we've never had a president who ran as a, what would be the best way
Naked
to describe
racist,
it?
an open racist.
No, not even that. We've had open racists before, but somebody who turned it into an identity politics per se. We've never had something like that before. I mean, we have.
We just haven't since the 1950s or 60s. I mean, George Wallace in the 60s was viewed as an anomaly. Segregation now, segregation forever. But he was kind of the last politician. You had the white segregationists, but they all basically died out or left office, or in the case of Robert Byrd, changed their mind. But your point is well taken, Jared. Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. One other question occurred to me that I'd like to kind of add to the mix here, and that is, to the extent that the Democratic Party is reacting to Donald Trump by saying, oh my God, this guy's a racist, to what extent has Trump by using with his racist tweet so captured the media narrative that the Democratic narratives of we need to have health care for everybody in this country, we need to have free education for everybody in this country, we need to be taxing the rich and the corporations again so that we can build out our infrastructure in this country, we need to put people back to work and bring our jobs home. These are traditional Democratic positions. To what extent are those all being drowned out by Trump's racism? Calvin in Mobile, Alabama. Hey, Calvin, your thoughts?
Yeah, Tom. Not the third caller. He was on point, but you're right. The Democrats always react, even before Trump. They always react instead of attack. The strategy is these people don't care about their health care. They don't care about anything. All they care about is feeling good. And with Trump messaging and the Republicans messaging, they've been doing this for well over 40 years.
Oh yeah, this is Nixon's Southern strategy being done out in the open. Completely out in the open. And now what's happening is those who have ingrained racism in them,
they're all coming together. They already the enemy is not at the door. The enemy is in your house. Now, we can discuss how horrible they are and this kind of. What is our strategy? Are we going to be like these wimpy debates? They're wimpy. The only one that I believe came out and did anything of substance as far as getting with Donald Trump is Kamala Harris. She went straight at Biden and his crap that they've been doing for well over years. See, look at Biden's record.
Yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole right now, Calvin.
I don't want to go there. But what Democrats? What is your policy to get? And I'm going to say this here: my 3 children who don't believe in voting anymore. How are you going to get them to vote? You're going to be nice and wimpy. You got to scare the hell out of them.
Yeah. So do you think that it's possible then, Calvin, that Trump's explicit and overt racism and the enthusiastic response it's getting from his white base, I mean, his polling numbers right now are better than they've ever been during his entire presidency. Do you think that is going to be the thing that's going to scare your kids into voting?
No.
What's it going to take?
No. Take away what you have. They're going to take away your stuff with that. These are brown shirts. What is a brown shirt? Brown shirt is ISIS. This is what the Nazis were doing to gather up people.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to paint a picture of your enemy, a clear present danger. If you don't do that, they're not going to fight. Do you know, in just the state in Pennsylvania, 70% of the people didn't go out to vote?
Yeah. So do you think then that it's time for Democrats to start using the F word, fascism, and start characterizing? Yeah. Okay. I'm with you, Calvin. Yeah, I'm totally with you. Thank you very much.
Pull out all the weapons.
There you go. There you go. Don't disarm. Okay. Amen. Thank you, Lynn in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Lynn, your thoughts?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for coming to St. Paul. I just wanted to say that when I was a kid, I had to confront my own racism in a big way. I was a middle-class white girl living in a household with 3 African-American working-class kids. And was the 60s. The whole society was very raw and emotional. And I had to learn a lot about how I reacted to people, and being aware that when things were said to me that I didn't like, I wouldn't automatically, or I did go to racist places in my mind. I couldn't say anything, and we muddled through. When my kids started going to school, they were part of the busing program, their entire K through 12 education. They in Nashville and in St. Paul, it was they were the minority, however you say it. They were in the minority.
Right. So they were bused into majority black schools.
The busing went both ways.
Right.
And I was tutoring. I still tutor in the public school system for like 30 years. And I have the opportunity to learn people's stories and understand as best as I can what their experiences are, what their life is. But there are plenty of times in those situations, where I had to bite my tongue, back off, try to think about my own body language or tone of voice, and it's not easy. What I see with my middle class friends who insist that they're not racist, they don't have experience with African American working class people.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to say I'm not a racist because they've never been confronted with issues of anger and racism.
I suspect that's true of probably the majority of white people, that they've lived in a white bubble their entire lives.
And in St. Paul, I've talked with several white people who insist that our situation here in St. Paul is, better than any other place in the country, and we have, the difference between what African American people make and white people make is one of the greatest discrepancies in the country.
Yeah, it truly is. Lynn, thank you, and black wealth versus white wealth too. Lynn, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for listening to us there in St. Paul. We'll be back. It's coming up on the top of the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. It's the Mueller Report. We're on page 110. This is about the June 9th, 2016 meeting at Trump Tower. The Russian attorney who spoke at the meeting, Natalia Veselnitskaya, had previously worked for the Russian government and maintained a relationship with that government throughout this period of time. She claimed that funds derived from illegal activities in Russia were provided to Hillary Clinton and other Democrats. Trump Jr. requested evidence to support those claims, but Veselnitskaya did not provide such information. She and her associates then turned to a critique of the origins of the Magnitsky Act, a 2012 statute that imposed financial and travel sanctions on Russian officials and that resulted in a retaliatory ban on adoptions of Russian children. Trump Jr. suggested that the issue could be revisited when and if candidate Trump was elected. After the election, Veselnitskaya made additional efforts to follow up on the meeting, but the Trump transition team did not engage. Sub A, setting up the June 9 meeting. Sub I, outreach to Donald Trump Jr. Aras Agalarov is a Russian real estate developer with ties to Putin and other members of the Russian government, including Russia's Prosecutor General, Yuri Chaika. Aras Agalarov is the president of the Crocus Group, a Russian enterprise that holds substantial Russian government construction contracts and, as discussed above, worked with Trump in connection with the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow and a potential Trump-Moscow real estate project. The relationship continued over time as the parties pursued the Trump-Moscow project in 2013-14 and exchanged gifts and letters in 2016. For example, in April 2016, Trump responded to a letter from Aras Agalarov with a handwritten note. Aras Agalarov expressed interest in Trump's campaign, passed on congratulations for winning in the primary, and according to one email drafted by Goldstone, an offer of his support, that of many of his important Russian friends and colleagues, especially in reference to U.S.-Russian relations. On June 3, 2016, Emin Agalarov called Goldstone, Emin's then publicist. Goldstone is a music and events promoter who represented Emin Agalarov from approximately late 2012 until late 2016. While representing Emin Agalarov, Goldstone facilitated the ongoing contact between the Trumps and the Agalarovs, including an invitation that Trump sent to Putin to attend the 2016 Miss Universe pageant. The rest of that is redacted by Bill Barr. Goldstone understood Russian political connection and, Goldstone understood, redacted by Bill Barr, a Russian political connection, and Emin Agalarov indicated that the attorney was a prosecutor. Goldstone recalled that the information that might interest the Trumps involved Hillary Clinton, and then the rest of the page is deleted, redacted by Bill Barr. Page 112, the top paragraph is redacted by Bill Barr. The redacted by Bill Barr, mentioned by Emin Agalarov, was Natalia Veselnitskaya. From approximately 1998 until 2001, Veselnitskaya worked as a prosecutor for the Central Administrative District of the Russian Prosecutor's Office, and she continued to perform government-related work and maintain ties to the Russian government following her departure. She lobbied and testified about the Magnitsky Act, which imposed financial sanctions and travel restrictions on Russian officials, and which was named for a Russian tax specialist who exposed a fraud and later died in a Russian prison. Putin called the statute a purely political, unfriendly act, and Russia responded by barring a list of current and former U.S. officials from entering Russia and by halting the adoption of Russian children by U.S. citizens. Veselnitskaya performed legal work for Denis Katsiev, the son of Russian businessman Peter Katsiev, and for his company Prevazon Holdings Limited, which was a defendant in a civil forfeiture action alleging the laundering of proceeds from the fraud exposed by Magnitsky. She also appears to have been involved in an April 2016 approach to a U.S. congressional delegation in Moscow offering confidential information from the Prosecutor General of Russia about interactions between certain political forces in our two countries. Shortly after his June 3rd call with Emin Aglarov, Goldstone, we're on page 113 now, Goldstone emailed Trump Jr. The email stated, "Good morning. Emin just called and asked me to contact you with something very interesting. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father, Aris, this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and and her dealings with Russia, and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Aris and Emin. What do you think is the best way to handle this information, and would you be able to speak to Emin about it directly? I can also send this info to your father via Rona, but it is also ultra-sensitive, so wanted to send to you first. Best, Rob Goldstone." Within minutes of this email, Trump Jr. responded, emailing back, "Thanks, Rob, I appreciate that. I am on the road at the moment, but perhaps I just speak to Emin first. Seems we have some time, and if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. Can we do a call first thing next week when I am back?" Goldstone conveyed Trump Jr.'s interest to Emin Aglarov, emailing that Trump Jr., quote, "wants to speak personally on the issue." On June 6, 2016, Emin Aglarov asked Goldstone if there was any news, and Goldstone explained that Trump Jr. was likely still traveling for the final elections, where Trump will be crowned the official nominee. On the same day, Goldstone again emailed Trump Jr. and asked whether Trump Jr. was free to talk with Emin about this Hillary info. Page 114 now. Trump Jr. asked if they could speak now, and Goldstone arranged a call between Trump Jr. and Emin Aglarov. The Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wow. Donald Trump just went full Hitler in the, or full Mussolini, shall we say, in this little mini press scrum that he did. I guess he's got a bunch of supporters there. Some guy wearing a flag. I remember, when you used to get arrested for that. But it's amazing. He said Ilhan Omar praises ISIS. He said that the squad hates America. That they're not just socialists; they're communists. I mean, this is the kind of hyperbole that's going to get Democrats assassinated. And this is. And he went off on how his ICE raids over the weekend were so successful. Trump has actually deported fewer people than Obama did. Now, that's not to justify what Trump is doing. That's to make the point that what Donald Trump has done is take a normal, routine function of government, which is finding people who are in the country illegally and who have committed a crime and removing them from the country. And all of the people who were targeted for deportation this weekend were people who already had literally warrants against them. Maybe not all of them. The reporting I'm seeing says that it's all of them, which is what Obama did, right? I mean, President Obama deported every single year. President Obama deported more people than Donald Trump has deported in any given year. So why all this focus on it? Why all this discussion about it? Well, it's kind of morphed into what's going on the southern border, first of all. But secondly, and I think more importantly, Donald Trump has been hyping it. He's been going on to Twitter. And, I was talking in the last hour about the hive mind, how basically our electronic media, our social media has created this giant hive mind where, when the racists come out, who are a minority in America, they're a sizable minority, but they're a minority in America. When these racists come out, it used to be that, they kind of had to hide that stuff. Polite company didn't accept it, as it were. And but now with this giant kind of hive mind, they can come out and say, do their racist rants like Trump just did on TV. And what they find is that there's a bunch of other racists out there who are like, hey, I'll friend you, I'll be your buddy. And this then causes people who might not have been even really, frankly, thinking about race. I'm talking largely of white people right now who were not thinking about, all these, although, how can you not these days? But basically, it's a recruiting tool, is the bottom line of what I'm saying. So in the previous hour, we were asking, some pretty fundamental questions. Is America no longer a melting pot? A couple of people have called to say, well, we never really were. But we held to that ideal. Or maybe we didn't. And then you got, Trump tweeting like David Duke and Republicans being completely silent about it. And asking the question, has the Republican base moved so far to the racist, hateful Fox News right that this is actually a winning strategy for Donald Trump? He clearly thinks so. If he didn't think that appealing nakedly to racism, nativism, homophobia, misogyny, if he didn't think that those things would help him win elections, he wouldn't be doing them. He has to get reelected or he's going to go to prison. And he knows that. And his family members may go to prison too if he doesn't get reelected. If he does get reelected, this project to call for a constitutional convention, it's called a Convention of States, and you can easily Google it, there's a website. They are really moving ahead fast. I mean, 3 states just in the first 3 months of this year signed on to have a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution. If Trump gets reelected and if there's a big win in the House and the Senate, expect our Constitution to get rewritten. This is how the Weimar Republic died in 1933. When, after the burning of the Reichstag building, after the burning of the Parliament building in Berlin, Hitler got passed through his legislature what were called the Enabling Acts to enable him to deal with the crisis, a state of emergency. And that state of emergency essentially suspended the German Constitution. And that was the end of it. That was the formal, official end of the Weimar Republic. You can Google it. And I am strongly of the opinion that if Donald Trump gets reelected president, with all these right-wing judges that Mitch McConnell, for years during the Obama presidency, McConnell refused, for the last 2 years of the Obama presidency, McConnell refused to allow one judge got through, right? No judges. So there's this huge backlog. Donald Trump in 2.5 years has put more judges on the bench than any president in the history of the United States. And FDR was president for 3.5 terms. That's how huge this project has been, that has been funded for many, many years by hardcore right-wing billionaires, through the Federalist Society and now through this Convention of States thing, run by a guy who's like in tight with the Kochs. I see the end of our republic if he gets reelected. I really think the stakes are that high. And he is just doubling and tripling down on hate and racism and trying to portray the entire Democratic Party, and he won't even say its actual name. He calls it the Democrat Party, which was the old, you already know, you've heard that many times. But in any case, he's just doubling down on this. He clearly believes this will get him elected. This is a total base strategy. He and the Republican Party, where you're hearing just crickets, right? Because, they don't want to admit that they are willing to campaign as racist, but they've been doing it ever since Nixon rolled out the Southern strategy in 1968. So what we have now is just raw, naked racism, not to mention, and xenophobia and bigotry of all kinds, not to mention his misogyny, his hatred of women. is defending Alex Acosta and all this kind of stuff. I mean, what you have is this appeal to white men, basically. And he's betting that he can get enough white men and frankly, racist white women as well. Keep in mind, Donald Trump won 53% of white women in 2016. This naked appeal to basically white people to say, you know, here it is. Is this going to be a winning strategy for Donald Trump? Is his ability to hype things, to basically do a reality show around, for example, these immigration raids, right? Like I said, they were routine. They were as they have been for the last, 20 years. Bush did it, Obama did it, I'm sure Clinton did it. I haven't looked at the statistics, but I have for Bush and Obama. And now Trump, the Trump administration is doing it. It's pretty much the same thing. This is a separate issue from what's happening on our southern border. And yet Trump was able, using his reality TV star skills that NBC taught him so well when he was on The Apprentice, and they literally did teach him. And they spent millions teaching him. That he has been able to use his reality star skills to turn routine government functions into campaign messaging and into hysteria, and to strike fear into not just the quote, illegal immigrant, end quote, community, the community of people who are here without documentation, but also into the community of Latinos more broadly, who are, constantly facing their own version. Well, not version. They're also hearing, go back to where you came from. The Pew Center has just released a remarkable report, a remarkable study showing that basically the vast majority of African Americans, Asians, and Hispanics in the United States have been told, go back to where you came from at some point in their lives. And frankly, with a fair amount of frequency. So this is where we're at right now, where naked, raw hate and racism and misogyny, it's no coincidence that he's going after 4 women. Number 1, women of color. Number 2, progressives. Number 3, that he's going after these women and making that the centerpiece of his reelection strategy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So how do we message against this? And is this going to work for him? And what will that mean? And welcome back. Boy, what a day, huh? Gary in Baden, Pennsylvania. Baden. One of these days, Gary, I'll remember it right.
That's all right. That's all right. It's Baden.
Baden. Thank you.
Baden. And thank you for taking my call once more.
Next time you talk to Joyce, tell her to spell it Bayden, and I'll get it right. What's up, Gary?
Yeah, God. You're terrific. God bless you.
Thank you.
One of the greatest men. I never met you. I'm going to say it right on the air. I hope you're not uncomfortable in saying one of the greatest people I've ever.
Well, thank you. I guarantee you I'm not. But in any case, let's continue with our conversation, Gary.
Okay. I'm going to get in quickly as I can a few perspectives on what you're talking about. Number one is before I get into it, I'm going to say it. That we have a leader, a lot of times he doesn't walk, he crawls.
I don't know what that means.
And it's there, pardon me?
I don't know what that means.
It means what does it mean when a man crawls instead of walks to the greater good, to something good and right, such as social justice and all the rest?
I think Trump is pushing back against social justice.
Yeah, well, it's evil. Maybe I'm not articulating quite right, but it's evil to me.
Okay.
This is not how a human being should operate. And having said that, the central question remains for me is what kind of country do we want? I know I'm not the only one to say this, probably. What kind of country do we want? And I hope when we talked the last time that an event or a crisis, as you said, we don't know which one it could be, determines the future fate of our country, that we don't decide what the future fate of our country is. An event or a crisis may do it.
All right. Well, for Hitler, what took him to power was the burning of the Parliament building. What re-solidified his power when he began slipping in late 1936, early 1937, as the German economy was sliding back into recession, was his invasion, his annexation of Austria, and then his invasion of Poland. So,
Right.
so if 9/11 brought Republicans to power, and was for the Republican Party and the GOP, broadly was their Reichstag fire. What's next? A war. And Trump kept saying that Obama was going to have a war with Iran in order to get reelected. He's got to be thinking like that.
In addition to that, it's at the core again, and I'm going to keep in this vein because I believe this. At the core of this, Trump is a near perfect example of an individual that says that wealth undermines democracy.
Right.
It can, and it is. It is actually undermining our way of life and democracy. And we can't go on like this. We need, I hope we can find one. I hope there's somebody that steps up to the plate. We need a leader who represents stability and has statesmanship and has integrity.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, we certainly don't have that, frankly, anywhere that I can see in the Republican Party. Nowhere, including Mitt Romney, who's the so-called moderate superstar and, has been sitting back biting his tongue and whimpering. Gary, thank you. Well said on all points. And it raises an interesting question, which is, will the Republicans ever have another Abraham Lincoln? I'm suspecting not. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Our program today is brought to you by 8 Sleep. The pod is the first bed designed to boost your performance. More information at 8sleep.com/Thom, THOM. Welcome back. Wow. This is such a large topic. I was talking about the hive mind. I'm wondering how this is influencing the Republican Party. And here's another piece to the question. Is Trump's naked racism, we've now, his misogyny has been on display forever, right? Particularly since the Access Hollywood tape, where Mike Pence said, "Mother isn't going to like this." Mother is how he refers to his wife, Karen. He literally said, "Mother is not going to like this." From there forward, we know about Trump's misogyny, his hatred of women, and his denigration of women, his trashing President Obama throughout his presidency, saying that he's not a legitimate American, therefore not a legitimate president. a naked racist appeal. Before that, it was his calling for the death penalty and for the execution of the Central Park Five, who were all completely innocent, were exonerated by DNA, and then they actually found the guy who so horribly, beat and raped that woman in Central Park. We've known about this, but he hasn't used it explicitly as a campaign strategy. Well, actually he has. His very first speech, he comes down the elevator in Trump Tower and he starts talking about Mexicans are rapists and murderers. So, really, I guess, he figures, hey, racism worked well in 2016, it'll work well in 2020. So then the question is, what about the rest of the Republican Party? Are other Republicans going to join him in campaigning on racism? Now, we know that campaigning on racism is actually a strategy that works. It got a lot of Southern governors elected, reelected. It got George Wallace, as a Democratic nominee back before the era of civil rights in the 60s. So, will the Republican Party recover its soul, if it ever had one? Well, arguably it had a good soul back in the era of Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, the last two progressive Republican presidents. But will the Republican Party get a soul? Or are they going to go in on this? Has Trump stepped over, I guess the question is, in a way, has Trump stepped over a line? Obviously, he stepped over a line for Democrats. And he may have stepped over a line for the middle, right? For the so-called undecided voters or unaffiliated voters. I call them low information voters. I'm guessing he's pushed probably about half of them. And these are, by the way, mostly white people. I'm guessing he's pushed about half of them in his direction because at their core they were racists. And he's offended about half of them. But is it going to be enough for them to show up and vote against him? The ones who are racists, I'm guessing he's figuring he's reaching out to them, and they will show up to reelect him. But has he pushed this so far that the Republican Party is going to step back and say, whoa, this is like, when he said there's very fine people among the Nazis in Charlottesville when they murdered Heather Heyer. You actually had a Nazi rally that murdered a young woman, and Donald Trump said they're very fine people, and the Republicans were like, zippered their mouths, and just held their heads down and waited for it to go over, to blow over. Well, this is not going to blow over. This is obviously his reelection strategy. This isn't a one-day blunder. This isn't a one-speech blunder. This is Donald Trump's reelection strategy. How many Republicans are going to join him in it? Frankly, right now, all of them have joined him in it by their silence. As Sir Edmund Burke said, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good people to do or say nothing. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the Republican Party right now. Will the Republican Party be harmed or helped by this electorally?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And will the Republican Party recover some shred or modicum of decency and reject this guy? I'm betting they don't. It's the Mueller Report, reading page 155. This is about the meeting in the Seychelles with Eric Prince, Dmitriev, Nader, and Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was apparently there or in the area at the same time, met with them initially. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed in his meetings with Prince for two reasons. First, he believed that the Russians needed to be communicating with someone who had more authority with the incoming administration than Eric Prince had. Second, he had hoped to have a discussion of greater substance, such as outlining a strategic roadmap for both countries to follow. Dmitriev told Nader that, and the rest was blocked out by Bill Barr, and then adds, Prince's comments were insulting, and the rest of that is blocked out by Bill Barr. Hours after the second meeting, Prince sent 2 text messages to Bannon from the Seychelles. As described further below, investigators were unable to obtain the content of these or other messages between Prince and Bannon, and the investigation also did not identify evidence of any further communication between Prince and Dmitriev after their meetings in the Seychelles. Item 3, Eric Prince's meeting with Steve Bannon after the Seychelles trip. After the Seychelles meetings, Prince told Nader that he would inform Bannon about his discussion with Dmitriev and would convey that someone within the Russian power structure was interested in seeking better relations with the incoming administration. On January 12th, 2017, Prince contacted Bannon's personal assistant to set up a meeting for the following week. Several days later, Prince messaged her again asking about Bannon's schedule. Prince said that he met Bannon at Bannon's home upon returning to the United States in mid-January and briefed him about several topics, including his meeting with Dmitriev. Prince told the office, that's the Mueller office, that he explained to Bannon that Dmitriev was the head of a Russian sovereign wealth fund and was interested in improving relations between the United States and Russia. Prince had on his cell phone a screenshot of Dmitriev's Wikipedia page dated January 16, 2017, and Prince told the Mueller office that he likely showed that image to Bannon. Prince also believed he provided Bannon with Dmitriev's contact information. According to Prince, Bannon instructed Prince not to follow up with Dmitriev, and Prince had the impression that the issue was not a priority for Bannon. Prince related that Bannon did not appear angry, just relatively uninterested. Bannon, by contrast, told this office that he never discussed with Prince anything regarding Dmitriev, RDIF, or any meetings with Russian individuals or people associated with Putin. Bannon also stated that Prince mentioned such a meeting, that had Prince mentioned such a meeting, Bannon would have remembered it, and Bannon would have objected to such a meeting having taken place. The conflicting accounts provided by Bannon and Prince could not be independently clarified by reviewing their communications, because neither one was able to produce any of the messages they exchanged in the time period surrounding the Seychelles meeting. Prince's phone contained no text messages prior to March 2017, although provider records indicate that he and Bannon exchanged dozens of messages. Prince denied deleting any messages, but claimed he did not know why there were no messages on his device from before March of 2017. Bannon's devices similarly contained no messages in the relevant time period, and Bannon also stated that he did not know why messages did not appear on his device. Bannon told the office, the Mueller office, that during both the months before and after the Seychelles meeting, he regularly used his personal BlackBerry and personal email for work-related communications, including those with Prince, and he took no steps to preserve those work communications. That, by the way, is a violation of the law that the Republicans are all bent out of shape that they say Hillary violated by deleting emails. D, Kirill Dmitriev's post-election contact with Rick Gerson concerning U.S.-Russia relations. Dmitriev's contacts during the transition period were not limited to those facilitated by Nader. In approximately late November 2016, the UAE National Security Advisor introduced Dmitriev to Rick Gerson, a friend of Jared Kushner, who runs a hedge fund in New York. Gerson stated that he had no formal role in the transition and had no involvement in the Trump campaign other than the occasional casual discussions about the campaign with Kushner. Turning to page 157. After the election, Gerson assisted the transition by arranging meetings for transition officials with former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and a UAE delegation led by Crown Prince Mohammed. Oh, Crown Prince Mohammed, I earlier mentioned, I thought he was Saudi. He must be UAE. When Dmitriev and Gerson met, they principally discussed potential joint ventures between Gerson's hedge fund and RDIF. Dmitriev was interested in improved economic cooperation between the United States and Russia and asked Gerson who he should meet with in the incoming administration who would be helpful toward this goal. Gerson replied that he would try to figure out the best way to arrange appropriate introductions, but noted that confidentiality would be required because of the sensitivity of holding such meetings before the new administration took power and before cabinet nominees could be confirmed by the Senate. Gerson said he would ask Kushner and Michael Flynn who the, quote, key person or people were on the topics of reconciliation with Russia, joint security concerns, and economic matters. Dmitriev told Gerson that he had been tasked by Putin to develop and execute a reconciliation plan between the United States and Russia. He noted in a text message to Gerson that if Russia was, quote, approached with respect and willingness to understand our position, we can have major breakthroughs quickly, end quote. Gerson and Dmitriev exchanged ideas in December 2016 about what such a reconciliation plan would include. Gerson told the office that the transition team had not asked him to engage in these discussions with Dmitriev, and that he did so on his own initiative and as a private citizen. On January 9th, 2017, the same day he asked Nader whether meeting Prince would be worthwhile, Dmitriev sent his biography to Gerson. It's the Mueller report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Your liver. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This is interesting. Citizen Sarah tweeted to me a clip out of the Palmer report asking, Donald Trump went off on this unhinged meltdown over the weekend, telling the squad, these 4 young women of color, 3 of whom were born in the United States, to go back to the countries that they came from, the implicitly S-hole countries. And I'll just share the 2 paragraphs that Sarah clipped in here. She said, "This morning, Donald Trump woke up and promptly went off on one of his most unhinged meltdowns to date. This is beyond the pale even for a racist like Trump. It's left a lot of people asking what triggered it. And the Palmer report says the answer is in plain sight. Donald Trump spent his week getting his butt kicked on multiple fronts. He put down a whole lot of political capital on trying to win the 2020 census battle, only to give up entirely. His friend Jeffrey Epstein got arrested on charges of sex trafficking of minors, even as the media began reporting on wild parties that Trump and Epstein used to throw together. Trump's Secretary of Labor, Alexander Acosta, who initially got Epstein off the hook, had to resign over it. And Mike Pence's visit to Trump's immigration concentration camps was a public relations nightmare. So Trump had to change the subject, and he's expressing his genuine rage that, his white privilege is not being acknowledged, I guess. Albert, I don't have a city for you. Where are you calling from? Is this 310 area code? Is that Maryland?
Tom, that's Los Angeles.
Oh, Los Angeles. Oh, that's right. Hey, Albert, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey. Yeah, I want to talk about why it is that young African Americans aren't voting. I know you brought up earlier, scaring us is not going to be the way to get us into voting, because what we're seeing now is, Republicans find ways to cheat the system and keep us from voting. But there's a lot of Democrats, too, and I'm not trying to get on Democrats, but I'm just trying to tell you what it is, who, for instance, all the stuff that Donald Trump has done, there's no consequences, nothing. So people don't believe in the system. Scaring black people who don't have anything is not going to do anything. Obama got black people to vote by preaching hope, change, and all this other stuff. All right, and so that's why when we hear people who say they are moderate, that means they don't want to change the system. And every black caller that's called in has talked about how racism is in the system. Yeah. And if we don't want to change the system, then what's the point of participating?
Well, and for people who are just tuning in and wondering where this scaring black people thing came from, it was an earlier caller, an African-American man, who called and said that his kids were not voting. They didn't think the voting did any good. And I said, what's it going to take to get your kids to vote? And he said, you're going to have to scare the hell out of them. You're going to have the brown shirts in the streets. And I'm like, I think they already are. But anyhow, so you're responding to that, Albert, basically.
Yes, that is correct. And so scaring us is not going to get us to vote. When we hear moderates saying, things like, well, we don't need a lot of change. That's the furthest thing that's going to get us to come out and vote, because that just means we're already marginalized, so we're going to stay marginalized. So what's the point in voting?
Yeah.
In order to combat this crazy man, you need to have something far left. And who used to be our good allies were white women. Now it feels like, and I don't know if it's true, but this is just a perception, it feels like they have turned their backs on us. And at the same time, that's just how we feel. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They voted for this man who said he was, going to grab them by the you-know-what and all this other stuff, and then they got the nerve to talk about sexism.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the questions that we don't have an answer to is, 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump in 2016. Was that because Trump was Trump, or was that because he was running against Hillary Clinton? And I don't know the answer to that. It doesn't make sense to me that white women would vote against a white woman who is running for president if there's some, piece of identity politics to it. But there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of moving pieces here, plus all the just basic raw racism that's been hiding under the surface. That's now, particularly with this hive mind of social media, is starting to erupt into the open. That Donald Trump, it's a wave that he's like surfing. So Albert, thank you for your thoughts. I appreciate it. Ramon in San Francisco. Hey Ramon, thanks for listening to 910 AM. What's up?
Oh, thank you, sir. My idea is that anytime we have crisis, every day practically with the government and his policies, they use smoke screens. For instance, what we should be talking about right now is about how destroying the republic. This is the last thing we own as a free country.
Yeah.
And then it happened, the Epstein scandal. Bill Barr, when they announced it last week that they had these pictures that they took from him from his mansion, and Bill Barr said he was not going to be part of the investigation because he had conflicts.
You're talking about Epstein.
Next day, when he found out that there were pictures, the next day he said, "No, I'm going to take over." So now he's there. He's watching those pictures, and he's probably burning them. Who knows?
Yeah, these are the surveillance tapes that Jeffrey Epstein, apparently, surveillance tapes, showing who came into his house and who didn't, and is Donald Trump on those tapes?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And now, if this would be all these things that we see on the papers every day, racism and all these crazy things, if it'd be a book, it'd be a great book to read, I swear.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's reality, and we're living it.
Yeah.
But we have to do something. We all have to vote next time. All of us. Let's go out in the mass. We'll defeat the purposes of this president.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you very much, Ramon. I appreciate it. Barbara in Sun City, Arizona. Hey, Barbara, what's on your mind?
Hi. Well, if we get a chance to vote.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi complaining, "Oh, he's so horrible," and she comes out every week. It's like, well, do something about it. But at the same time, if you really do something about it and you end up with Mike Pence, who Bill Maher seems to think is a wonderful man, and he's, you dig an inch into him, and he's religiously racist and bigoted, standing in front of the people, and these poor people in cages wearing alt-right uniforms. Everyone in that picture is wearing a polo shirt. The only thing they're not doing is carrying a torch. And they're standing there like the Nazis inspecting the camps. It was absolutely disgusting.
I hadn't even considered that. The polo shirts have become the alt-right uniform.
And the khaki pants.
And wow, and they were all wearing that. And you think that was intentional? That this was a shout out to the alt-right? Wow.
And there's articles about the khaki pants, but there's the fact that they were wearing that, and then he came out, Pence, and said, "Oh, I spoke to the children, and they said see," and it warmed his heart. He's just as bad as Omarosa said, a psychopath and racist as Trump. And we can't, we had the benefit of getting rid of Agnew before we got rid of Nixon, but we're going to end up with the soft-spoken who even fooled Bill Maher into thinking that he's a better alternative.
Yeah, I get it. Barbara, thank you. Alina in Seattle. Hey, Alina, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. Well, that was a quick wait. So I wanted to just say that Trump is tweeting about freshman congressmen because he's scared of them.
I agree.
They will all want to impeach him, and I think that's his tactic. I've been watching him for all these years, and I think
it's partly that he's scared of them, and I think it's partly that he knows that they can be the focus of hate, of white male hate. They are women. They are people of color. One of them is an immigrant. I mean, so he gets it on both sides.
But they're not going to take it sitting down. They'll go right back at him.
I sure hope so.
Double down. Hopefully, Nancy Pelosi will finally stand behind them after he is attacking them.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see if this is what it takes to get her to say something. Thank you, Alina. John in Minneapolis. John, we have a minute to the break. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that racism sells. The media love it. It brings eyeballs to screens, and the Republican Party loves it too, because all those issues that people want to talk about, real issues, governance issues, nothing's going to get done. And that's
well, actually, what is getting done is the Convention of States is moving forward very rapidly to rewrite our Constitution, and McConnell is putting right-wing judges on the court, at the pace of a couple a day.
Yep, yeah, and isn't that grand? And I wanted to say, there's 700,000 people in Minneapolis congressional district, or in this congressional district, and 78% of the voters voted for Ilhan Omar.
And let's hope that number goes up. John, thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. It's great to have fact-based stuff. I really appreciate it. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And 4 minutes hence, we shall be talking with Bob Ney with Talk Media News. We'll find out what the latest news is. Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, about the last half an hour, you've talked very extensively about everything I wanted to talk to you about, but there's a couple of key features. About a week and a half ago, when Trump was putting together I called his 4th of July campaign rally, I mentioned that the actual signs he should have is Make America White Again. That's gaining more popularity. Did you hear what Pelosi said that yesterday? I wonder if she was listening to your show and heard me say it. This is scary stuff. And what's happening, most people don't realize, and you've touched on it, is the fact that homophobic, racist, misogynistic Second Amendment base that helped put him in office are the ones that fit the Republicans in Congress and the Senate. They're not going to fight against that.
Right.
As long as that works for them, they're going to continue to pursue
Well,
that.
the question is, now that it's out in the open, how much longer will it work for them? Is putting all this out, I guess it's really, it could go one of two ways. Is putting all this out in the open going to cause decent, so far uncommitted white people to say, whoa, that's a bridge too far? Or is it going to cause them to say, yeah, I've been thinking of that all a long time. I was just afraid to say it out loud.
It's going to be a combination of both. But
obviously, but which is going to prevail?
Well, at this point, he is prevailing. He's manipulating the legal system, and that point that you made up that I've been telling my friends and colleagues for a long time, his main priority right now is to stay in office and then manipulate the legal system and then get reelected so he doesn't have to go to jail. Right. And then the second part of that is so his family can continue to make money on him as president. That's scary stuff,
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and he's riding both those waves.
Do you think the average white guy is going to vote for Kamala Harris, no matter how articulate and what a decent human being and qualified she is? There's no way a black woman is going to be elected president in this country, and you can see that at this point. That's how scary this situation is.
I'm not sure that that's true, but I get your point.
Listen to me, Tom. It is. There's no way she's going to get elected as president, no matter what happens.
Well, I hope you're wrong, Tim. I want to get another caller in here before the break.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Robbie in Portland. Hey, Robbie, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to give your listeners a quick tool about dealing with racism. It's interesting. I guess right now, Trump, in the 2016 election, I talked to quite a few conservatives who voted for Trump because they could not vote for Hillary. I don't need to go into that. But this coming election, it seems like what's going to be happening is, there's a lot of people in the 2016 election, Republicans, racist Republicans, who didn't vote for Trump because they thought he was a Democrat. I don't know if you remember that.
Sure.
So this woodwork's going to be really interesting. But do you know who Joey Gibson is?
Yeah, the Proud Boys guy, or Patriot Prayer, or whatever it is. He started one of the right groups.
Right, that guy. I confront him every time he comes down here to Portland, and what I do is, this is the tool I want to give to our listeners. We need to, when we're talking to the right, we need to address them with facts. We can't call them racist. We all know they're racist, but I think there's people there that are just being confused, obviously. But when you talk to them with facts, when I talk to Joey Gibson,
20 seconds, Robbie, to give an example.
Operation Fast and the Furious, the ATF gun walking scandal, the U.S. drug policies which are creating these things. When you bring up these facts to these racists, they cannot address them. Furthermore, the ratchet effect. You know what the ratchet effect is? It's when the centrists are winning. All your callers have been calling in and saying that basically we're being pulled to the right. So when you have individuals who are coming up, we have to address that America is a racist nation. And now what's happening is we have people like Joe Biden, who is anti-reintegration, and Kamala Harris, who is prosecuting the social people that basically Wells Fargo.
Yeah, this is okay, Robbie. You're doing it again. At some point. Anyway, we'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Norway is a democratic socialist country. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, talk media news and find out what's going on in the world today. On the line with us is Bob Ney, the author of Sideswiped, former congressman from Ohio. And this report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Hey, Bob, what's the latest on your windscreen here?
Well, Tom, it certainly has been an immigration weekend to be seen, that's for sure, and we can get into that in a second.
Well, what's so amazing to me, Bob, is that the number of arrests and the type of arrests that happened this weekend were actually lower in number and of the same type as happened during the entire Obama presidency. There was really nothing to see here, and in fact, Trump has deported in his 2.5 years has far fewer people than Obama did in any year. And so it's not that he's got some big crusade going. It's that he's got this giant publicity machine. He's doing a daily reality show out of the White House. And the reality show last week and the week before was, I'm going to, millions of people are going to, and it scared the crap out of the entire Hispanic community, or a lot of the, anybody who had extended family or friends who are here without documentation, and people hiding in their houses and things. But it was a stunt. Anyhow, back to you, Bob.
Well, that's what I was saying. When we say amazing immigration weekend, it was more argument over immigration than it was actually anything else.
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, he's moving forward. And what I thought was absolutely mind-blowing, if you look at the numbers of what exists, the actual numbers under the Obama administration, and you're totally correct, they far outweigh any amount of numbers under President Trump, which probably infuriates, frankly, the president if those numbers were out there. But there's still the perception that this was a big immigration weekend as far as going in and removing people, which actually basically didn't happen to any extent across the 6 or 7 cities that it was mentioned. But it didn't stop Kellyanne Conway from attacking Joe Biden over the Obama administration and how many people were actually deported under President Obama, which, if you look at that, that is the most hypocritical attack humanly possible, because the Trump administration is trying, in essence, or making it seem like they're going to deport everybody under the sun, yet Kellyanne Conway deflects by attacking Joe Biden for deportations under President Obama.
The one thing Donald Trump knows, and he learned this very well when he was trained how to be a reality TV star by NBC and at no doubt an incredible cost, was that it doesn't matter what's real, it just matters what people believe is real.
Correct. And so people with the base are happy that he's carrying out a certain amount of the deportations, which again, I surfed from 4:30 this morning, Tom, preparing for stations to try to find, some stats on it, to try to find video on it, something of that nature. And it basically was a mild weekend when it came actually to the deportation process. Now, that might be a smokescreen, though, for a rule that he's going to be doing, and I think that rule will be tomorrow. Yes, it'll be Tuesday. He's publishing a rule that will, in fact, say if you're coming from another country and you're seeking asylum, this would be in the United States, the first country that you pass through, you have to apply in that country.
Well, you have to apply to that country, in fact. My reading of that rule is that if you go from Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador into Mexico to try to get to the United States, you may not even apply for asylum, at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. You have to apply to Mexico for asylum.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So the first country you enter is where you're going to apply for the asylum. But if you're intended to go to the United States, technically you're not going to be able to reach that. Now, what are the odds on this being upheld by a court? Frankly, they are 50-50, actually, of the odds. So they could be upheld. There's a court process. It's just like today, Judicial Watch, I monitor all these groups. Judicial Watch, a conservative group, put out a press release today bragging about 250,000 people that notices were sent out today in Kentucky. And it did note in there attacking the Democratic Secretary of State of Kentucky as holding this process up. But they got an agreement out of the Commonwealth of Kentucky Judicial Watch to remove 250,000 some people. This is the same group that was getting a notice and a legal document in California to remove 1.6 million people. So unless there is some type of maybe congressional or federal action to try to fight this, it's going to be a state-by-state process. And a lot of this is under the radar screen, Tom, as you know.
Yeah,
under the radar screen.
Yep.
And then when we get to this battle with the president, obviously. And by the way, just as I've talked to people in D.C. today, and I kind of thought of myself, the president entering this fray with his racist comment about go back to your country, where you came from, go back to where you came from. Actually, if he had stayed out of that, it wasn't as bright a move getting in there. Had he stayed out of it, there might have been more conflict between, what happened with AOC.
Right. This race is, actually, he's pushing the Democratic Party back together. I agree with you. But, you were a Republican member of Congress from Ohio, and I understand you're not a Republican any longer, but do you think that the Republican Party is going to push back now that Trump has basically taken Nixon's Southern strategy and put it out in the open?
Well, I think eventually, as the election nears and that 22 some seats are up, especially in the Senate, I think eventually there will be some pushback. But right now, everybody is staying tight-lipped, on the entire issues, what they're doing. I think, though, if he continues to delve into these waters, which again, he should have stayed out of it. The statement he made, of course, is outrageous. But
he just doubled down 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, he did, and he will, because he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
I think this is his reelection strategy. I think he's scared to death if he doesn't get reelected, he's going to end up in prison, and he thinks that if he can get enough of his base out, he'll win. And I think he might be right, Bob. What do you think?
Well, I think he will be pushing to the wall. I just don't think he cares, in fact, Tom, if he will run over Republicans themselves. Remember that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he has no loyalty to party. I mean, he used to be a Democrat.
Speaker Ryan last week, former Speaker.
Yeah, I got it. Bob Ney. Bob, it's always great talking with you, and I always learn something. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
It's the Mueller Report. We're reading page 155. This is about the meeting in the Seychelles with Eric Prince, Dmitriev, Nader, and Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was apparently there or in the area at the same time, met with them initially. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed in his meetings with Prince for two reasons. First, he believed that the Russians needed to be communicating with someone who had more authority with the incoming administration than Eric Prince had. Second, he had hoped to have a discussion of greater substance, such as outlining a strategic roadmap for both countries to follow. Dmitriev told Nader that, the rest was blocked out by Bill Barr, and then adds, Prince's comments were insulting, and the rest of that is blocked out by Bill Barr. Hours after the second meeting, Prince sent 2 text messages to Bannon from the Seychelles. As described further below, investigators were unable to obtain the content of these or other messages between Prince and Bannon, and the investigation also did not identify evidence of any further communication between Prince and Dmitriev after their meetings in the Seychelles. Item 3, Eric Prince's meeting with Steve Bannon after the Seychelles trip. After the Seychelles meetings, Prince told Nader that he would inform Bannon about his discussion with Dmitriev and would convey that someone within the Russian power structure was interested in seeking better relations with the incoming administration. On January 12th, 2017, Prince contacted Bannon's personal assistant to set up a meeting for the following week. Several days later, Prince messaged her again asking about Bannon's schedule. Prince said that he met Bannon at Bannon's home upon returning to the United States in mid-January and briefed him about several topics, including his meeting with Dmitriev. Prince told the office, that's the Mueller office, that he explained to Bannon that Dmitriev was the head of a Russian sovereign wealth fund and was interested in improving relations between the United States and Russia. Prince had on his cell phone a screenshot of Dmitriev's Wikipedia page dated January 16, 2017, and Prince told the Mueller office that he likely showed that image to Bannon. Prince also believed he provided Bannon with Dmitriev's contact information. According to Prince, Bannon instructed Prince not to follow up with Dmitriev, and Prince had the impression that the issue was not a priority for Bannon. Prince related that Bannon did not appear angry, just relatively uninterested. Bannon, by contrast, told this office that he never discussed with Prince anything regarding Dmitriev, RDIF, or any meetings with Russian individuals or people associated with Putin. Bannon also stated that Prince mentioned such a meeting, that had Prince mentioned such a meeting, Bannon would have remembered it, and Bannon would have objected to such a meeting having taken place. The conflicting accounts provided by Bannon and Prince could not be independently clarified by reviewing their communications, because neither one was able to produce any of the messages they exchanged in the time period surrounding the Seychelles meeting. Prince's phone contained no text messages prior to March 2017, although provider records indicate that he and Bannon exchanged dozens of messages. Prince denied deleting any messages, but claimed he did not know why there were no messages on his device from before March of 2017. Bannon's devices similarly contained no messages in the relevant time period, and Bannon also stated that he did not know why messages did not appear on his device. Bannon told the office, the Mueller office, that during both the months before and after the Seychelles meeting, he regularly used his personal BlackBerry and personal email for work-related communications, including those with Prince, and he took no steps to preserve those work communications. That, by the way, is a violation of the law that the Republicans are all bent out of shape that they say Hillary violated by deleting emails. D, Kirill Dmitriev's post-election contact with Rick Gerson concerning U.S.-Russia relations. Dmitriev's contacts during the transition period were not limited to those facilitated by Nader. In approximately late November 2016, the UAE National Security Advisor introduced Dmitriev to Rick Gerson, a friend of Jared Kushner, who runs a hedge fund in New York. Gerson stated that he had no formal role in the transition and had no involvement in the Trump campaign other than the occasional casual discussions about the campaign with Kushner. Turning to page 157. After the election, Gerson assisted the transition by arranging meetings for transition officials with former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and a UAE delegation led by Crown Prince Mohammed. Oh, Crown Prince Mohammed, I earlier mentioned, I thought he was Saudi. He must be UAE. When Dmitriev and Gerson met, they principally discussed potential joint ventures between Gerson's hedge fund and RDIF. Dmitriev was interested in improved economic cooperation between the United States and Russia and asked Gerson who he should meet with in the incoming administration who would be helpful toward this goal. Gerson replied that he would try to figure out the best way to arrange appropriate introductions, but noted that confidentiality would be required because of the sensitivity of holding such meetings before the new administration took power and before cabinet nominees could be confirmed by the Senate. Gerson said he would ask Kushner and Michael Flynn who the, quote, key person or people were on the topics of reconciliation with Russia, joint security concerns, and economic matters. Dmitriev told Gerson that he had been tasked by Putin to develop and execute a reconciliation plan between the United States and Russia. He noted in a text message to Gerson that if Russia was, quote, approached with respect and willingness to understand our position, we can have major breakthroughs quickly, end quote. Gerson and Dmitriev exchanged ideas in December 2016 about what such a reconciliation plan would include. Gerson told the office that the transition team had not asked him to engage in these discussions with Dmitriev, and that he did so on his own initiative and as a private citizen. On January 9th, 2017, the same day he asked Nader whether meeting Prince would be worthwhile, Dmitriev sent his biography to Gerson. It's the Mueller Report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. It's the Mueller.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We've been talking about Trump's bringing naked racism into the dialogue, into basically, I mean, this is obviously his reelection strategy. It's also him being, I think, being set off by the fact that there's photos over with Jeffrey Epstein, and suddenly Bill Barr has decided that he's going to insert himself into the investigation of Epstein the day after he recused himself. Trump is going nuts. We'll get back to that conversation in just a minute. You know, will the Republican Party now flee from him, or will they embrace him now that he's taken the Southern strategy and put it right out in the open? Right? He has taken Nixon's Southern strategy. He's taken, Reagan. The first official speech that Reagan gave was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, or just down the road from there, the place where 3 civil rights workers were brutally murdered. They made a movie out of it, Mississippi Burning. Schwermer, Goodman, and Cheney were the 3 civil rights workers. That was dog whistle. That was referred to as dog whistle. Giving a speech about states' rights, to an all-white audience where there was a murder of civil rights workers. I would say every president, every Republican candidate, frankly, certainly every Republican president since Nixon has been campaigning on racism, but they've been doing it subtly, or at least in a way. It's fairly obvious to I think the majority of black people what they're up to, and you've seen the electoral swing, the partisan swing as a consequence of that. But it wasn't obvious to a lot of white people until now. So will the Republican Party be so shocked by this that they walk away from Trump? Or will they be so invigorated by the idea that, hey, it's easy to win elections just by cranking up white hatred and male hatred of women? I mean, he's going after the squad, hatred of immigrants. Which is it going to be? So we'll see. As I said, we'll get back to that conversation in just a minute. I wanted to have a quick talk, though, with Stephen Scheller. He's got a new book out called Big Greed, published by Strong Arm Press. He's an attorney and author. Scheller, SHELLER.com is his website. His book, like I said, Big Pharma, Big Greed. Pharma is out of control. Stephen, welcome to the program. Or welcome back.
Yeah, hi. How are you, Tom?
Good. So what's the latest outrage here?
Well, the latest outrage, so you understand it. There's an editorial that just appeared in the New York Times editorial section on July 7th. It's as if I wrote it 5 or 10 years ago. And to start it off, it says, nothing typifies the failure of health care in the United States like prescription drugs. Americans pay more for their medications, including those developed in America with taxpayer dollars, than residents of any other country in the world.
Yep.
It's astonishing.
Yeah, we are the country's, we are the nation, we are the world's village idiots. And, you know, this has become kind of the policy of the billionaires and the GOP is just keep ripping off the middle class. Just keep ripping off Americans. You know, do it with pharmaceuticals, do it with hidden charges on your hospital bills that your insurance company won't pay for. You know, there's a thing in the paper today about how Marriott has these, they're called resort fees that, you know, they say, oh, the price of the room is $140, but actually there's a $30 resort fee in there. Well, what the hell's a resort fee? Oh, it's just something that they tacked on. And
right. And the other interesting part of all this is Trump in his campaign promised he was going to do something about drug prices. Well, so far the only thing he's done is build a wall.
Yeah.
Or try to build a wall.
Well, drug prices are actually substantially up since he became president.
Gone way up.
And they've gone up every year since he became president.
Yeah, the whole story of the drug situation is outrageous. And I talk about this in my book, and I talk about how I successfully collected a lot of money from them, some billions of dollars for our government. However, these were like parking tickets compared to the amount of money the drug companies were making.
Right.
And it's just astonishing. In fact, drug makers are allowed to charge whatever they want here.
Yep.
It's not true in the rest of the world.
Yep.
And we're not even allowed, our government, Medicare, Medicaid, is not allowed to negotiate with drug makers for the prices.
Right. They have to, Medicare officially has to say, you know, sir, how much shall I pay you?
How much do you want?
Right, and then the drug company says this much, and then Medicare has to officially say, sir, yes, sir, may I have another? I mean, it's
disgusting. And what's really serious is that at least half the drugs that are being ingested by our population are useless, and those that are useful, they have often hidden the risks and failed to warn about it. That's why we probably have more casualties, I call them, in the United States than in the Vietnam, Korean War, Iraq War, and Afghanistan put together, primarily from the drug industry and particularly from Johnson & Johnson, since they have so many subsidiaries. I mean, deaths and serious injuries. Thousands and thousands of people. But, you know, the government seems to be allowing that to get away out of hand.
Amazing.
And it's just astonishing. And Medicare is required to cover all drugs, no matter how poorly or how well they work. And that's astonishing. I don't know if you knew this, but there are 2 statutes that permit the federal government to override patents on FDA-approved medications, meaning that we're not obligated to let them get away with this.
Right.
And we used to do this in the 50s and 60s.
Well, this is how the generic drug thing emerged, wasn't it? Or
oh yeah. Well, the generic drug thing is another joke.
Yeah.
And the other serious problem is government money is used to invent the drugs, many of them. The government can also override the patent in those cases.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? Where's Trump? He makes these promises.
Well, he doesn't care what's, you know, what Trump has figured out is that it doesn't matter what's real. What matters is what people believe is real. And so if he comes out and says, we're rolling out a policy to reduce prescription drug prices, that's all people hear. And, you know, and they don't know. And the majority of people in the United States probably, you know, the cost of their drugs is not crippling them. Probably a slim majority, but nonetheless. And so, you know, they're not paying attention. So, Stephen Scheller, the author of Big Pharma, Big Greed, what is your top recommendation for how we can get involved and what we can do about this?
My top recommendation is to get out, register, and vote for anybody but Trump.
Yeah.
They can vote for a goldfish; they'd be better off. But more importantly, think of the story of the fairy tale from Hans Christian Andersen, The Emperor's New Clothes.
Yep.
Do you remember two tailors, and they told a story about the emperor got these, they would make the emperor beautiful clothes, and he would be able to see anybody who didn't think the clothes were beautiful would be the people he couldn't trust.
Right.
So what ends up happening, if you remember the story, and this was, I remember, most childhood kids will remember this, all the audiences in the parade of the emperor, he was completely nude because they gave him no clothes, and he's marching around in the nude. Right. And everybody has to say he looks beautiful. He looks beautiful. The reason they have to say he looks beautiful, if they don't, he'd think they were crooks, because that's what the would be against him, and that's what the tailors told him. Then a little boy in the who was watching the parade says, "But the emperor's nude." Well, that's Trump's base. Yeah. They are so believing that he wears clothes and they need to read this fairy tale.
Yeah.
Because they are...
Well, I'm waiting for the little boy to say, who says the emperor has no clothes. I mean, Justin Amash tried that, and they're taking him down. Bob Corker tried that, they took him down. Jeff Flake tried that, they took him down.
That's what the emperor was doing. He's Christian Anderson.
Right, no, I get it. And the question is, when's the Republican Party going to wake up to the fact that they are the only reason that they're holding power is because of hate and misogyny and lies, and these lies extend, to pharma, as you write about, Stephen Schuller, in your book, Big Pharma, Big Greed, and pretty much everything else. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Stephen, I got to run, but thank you so much for dropping by.
All right, thank you.
Good talking with you. The website is Schuller.com, SHELLER.com. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Eric in Seattle. Hey, Eric, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, to me, this isn't, about race with the Trump tweets. I think it's more about money and power, and Trump will use whatever he wants.
In other words, he's using race to acquire power?
Well, yeah, but my question is, why is Pelosi also attacking these four other Democrats? And to me, it seems like sunshine's, the best disinfectant, and if they get their message out, to expose the kind of the corporate side of the Democrats, She almost set him up, and then Trump knocked him down.
Well, what happened with Pelosi, and I think it has, as the media tends to do, has been blown way out of proportion, is the chief of staff for one of these four women, and I forget which one it was. It may be AOC's chief of staff, but I could be wrong. It might be, I'm pretty sure it's AOC's chief of staff. 33-year-old guy, tweets out something basically trashing Pelosi. Or, trashing the New Democrats, or, the Blue Dog Democrats, the conservative Democrats. And Pelosi's response is, basically to whichever congresswoman it was, I think it was AOC, saying, do you realize that somebody is essentially speaking on your behalf and trashing your colleagues? And B, if you or anybody on your staff want to trash your colleagues, please run it by me first, because we've got bigger fish to fry here. We've got some real serious issues, and we can't have our caucus be fractured. And he has not since tweeted anything trashing conservative Democrats. And that was supposed to be the end of the story. It was not a big deal. But the media turned it into a big deal, and frankly, Pelosi is now saying, okay, this Trump is over the top here, and I'm not going to put up with it. So she's introducing a resolution to condemn Trump for his racist activities in the last couple of days. I think, frankly, the definition, and I just tweeted this just a minute ago, the definition of high crimes, if you look in your legal dictionaries, the definition of high crimes as used in the Constitution is abuse of office or abuse of power. And it doesn't have to actually fit under U.S. code. It doesn't have to violate any actual statute. It is abuse of office. And if this is not abuse of office, I don't know what is. I think that this is, what Trump has done and what Trump has said, and Eric, thank you for the call. I think what Trump has done and what Trump has said is entirely an impeachable offense. Lori in Marble Hill, Missouri. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hey, yes, I agree that I don't think the Republicans are going to fold. I think they're going to enable him because their agenda is being worked out right now. They're dismantling the EPA today as we speak, while everybody else is talking about his racism.
Yep.
And that permit process. Do you know about this?
No.
The permit process, just before the judge, that big corporation has brought before the courts that anybody who disagrees with the permit process for polluting their towns is off the table. They're going to take that away, our rights away from stopping this permit process from going through.
In other words, they're going to do away with public commentary on policies?
Yes, absolutely, and they're doing it right now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
I always wonder when he comes out and throws out this outrageous stuff, what is really happening? What is he really doing? He's really this.
Oh, he's tearing the government apart, and it's not just that. It's banking regulations, it's public lands, it's everything. Lori, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff. Kim in Laurel Hill, Florida, says here you disagree with me, so you go to the front of the line. What do you disagree about?
Well, I just, am I on the air?
You're on the air,
Hello?
Kim. Yes, you are on the air.
Okay. Y'all were talking about, the woman called in earlier about making the point that about Trump making a racist comment toward those women.
Yeah.
I don't think that's racism just because he disagreed. I think the Democrats use the race card every moment, every second of the day.
So you're saying Democrats use racial hatred to motivate voters? Give me an example of that, would you, Kim?
Is this a bias?
Kim, can you give me an example of? No, hey, Kim, stop for a minute. This is not Fox News. Okay, I'm going to put Kim on hold. Kim, this is not Fox News. This is not where we shout over each other. I asked you a very specific question. I'm going to put you back on the air in a second. And if you've got an answer for that question, I'd love to hear it. And if you don't, I'm going to let you go. But my question, Kim, is you're saying the Democrats, quote, use the race card. That means using racial hatred to motivate voters. And if you can give me an example of that, I'd love to hear it. Because this is new to me.
Yeah,
Kim, go ahead. You're on the air.
Okay, the reason everything that somebody says is not racist.
No, what's the example of Democrats using the race card?
Let me finish.
No, I'm not going to let you finish. You're not answering my question, Kim. That's the end of it. I'm sorry. Tracy in Earlville, Maryland. Hey, Tracy, what's in your mind today?
Hi, yeah. Thanks, Tom, for putting me on the air. I watch your show every day. I think you're the best thing going. Thank you very much for your program. This has to do with the abuse of power issue. Another caller was talking about this, and I'm wondering if anybody has ever suggested that Twitter look at abuse of power and whether Trump is actually violating terms of service. That's all I have to say.
Oh, I think he absolutely is. And by the way, I just retweeted Al Green. The Congressman Al Green just tweeted that he's going to try to force a vote on impeachment of Trump because of his racist comments. Telling people of color to go back to the country you came from is classic American racism. Every person of color has heard this, or most, at some point in their lives. And this is just classic racist stuff. And so Al Green says he's going to call for impeachment. I looked up the definition of high crimes. It says you can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, right? High crimes, you look in the legal dictionary, high crimes means abuse of the power of your office. You do not have to commit a crime as in U.S. code. There doesn't have to be anything that could be prosecuted in a court. It's abuse of the office of the presidency. And I'm telling you right now, Donald Trump is abusing his office, and that is a high crime, and that is an impeachable offense. And frankly, he should be impeached, in my opinion, Tracy.
Well, yeah, I agree, and I'm just wondering if any other caller or if anybody has ever proposed that cut him off at his knees regarding this Twitter account because he's using the platform to abuse power
on many occasions.
And I'm wondering if
it's been brought up many times, and I don't think that Twitter is going to give up this gold mine. This guy's making a pile of money for them. Remember when Les Moonves, the CEO of CBS, was on that conference call with his investors back in early 2016 during the Republican primary, and he said Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he's great for CBS. Keep it going, Donald. I mean, I think the guys over at Twitter they're just thinking the same thing.
Well, that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because that just inflames the social sphere and brings up more hatred and more divisiveness, and I think that's an abuse of the platform. We talk about abuse of power, but that's really an abuse of the platform.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your comments and taking my call.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Tracy. Jim in Lone Tree, Colorado. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, but...
Answer to what?
I'll keep it short. I could go on about racism, but how does this affect gerrymandering if they use,
Well, what the Supreme Court said is that it is just fine to use computers to micro-target, to gerrymander by block. In fact, they could even do it by house, but it can't be done based on race. It can only be done based on political affiliation or politics. But somehow, magically, there seems to be a correlation between the two. When you've got one party basically calling out to white people and trashing people of color, and you've got the other party all the people of color moving into the other party saying, wait a minute, we're being attacked, and people of goodwill basically, welcoming them in. Race and politics are inseparable. And yet the Supreme Court, John Roberts is doing his, this is why he blew up the Voting Rights Act. Oh, there's nothing there. But that's what's happening.
Does gerrymandering affect the Electoral College?
It affects it in as much as
voter suppression and gerrymandering, but
yeah, probably actually not so much because for example, in North Carolina, you've got 3 Democrats and 10 Republicans, even though 50-50 was the vote, Democrats and Republicans for members of the House, but those House members don't vote in the Electoral College. So, North Carolina has 13 electoral votes from their members of the House, and then, of course, 2 from their members of the Senate, et cetera. So, probably not, Jim. I'd have to, game that out in my head, but that seems to be the case. Anyhow, thanks for the call. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So is the Republican Party going to A, survive this, B, be hurt by this, or C, prosper because of this Trump racism? It's the Mueller Report. We're reading page 155. This is about the meeting in the Seychelles with Eric Prince, Dmitriev, Nader, and Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was apparently there or in the area at the same time, met with them initially. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed in his meetings with Prince for two reasons. First, he believed that the Russians needed to be communicating with someone who had more authority with the incoming administration than Eric Prince had. Second, he had hoped to have a discussion of greater substance, such as outlining a strategic roadmap for both countries to follow. Dmitriev told Nader that, the rest was blocked out by Bill Barr, and then adds, Prince's comments were insulting, and the rest of that is blocked out by Bill Barr. Hours after the second meeting, Prince sent 2 text messages to Bannon from the Seychelles. As described further below, investigators were unable to obtain the content of these or other messages between Prince and Bannon, and the investigation also did not identify evidence of any further communication between Prince and Dmitriev after their meetings in the Seychelles. Item 3, Eric Prince's meeting with Steve Bannon after the Seychelles trip. After the Seychelles meetings, Prince told Nader that he would inform Bannon about his discussion with Dmitriev and would convey that someone within the Russian power structure was interested in seeking better relations with the incoming administration. On January 12th, 2017, Prince contacted Bannon's personal assistant to set up a meeting for the following week. Several days later, Prince messaged her again asking about Bannon's schedule. Prince said that he met Bannon at Bannon's home upon returning to the United States in mid-January and briefed him about several topics, including his meeting with Dmitriev. Prince told the office, that's the Mueller office, that he explained to Bannon that Dmitriev was the head of a Russian sovereign wealth fund and was interested in improving relations between the United States and Russia. Prince had on his cell phone a screenshot of Dmitriev's Wikipedia page dated January 16, 2017, and Prince told the Mueller office that he likely showed that image to Bannon. Prince also believed he provided Bannon with Dmitriev's contact information. According to Prince, Bannon instructed Prince not to follow up with Dmitriev, and Prince had the impression that the issue was not a priority for Bannon. Prince related that Bannon did not appear angry, just relatively uninterested. Bannon, by contrast, told this office that he never discussed with Prince anything regarding Dmitriev, RDIF, or any meetings with Russian individuals or people associated with Putin. Bannon also stated that Prince mentioned such a meeting, that had Prince mentioned such a meeting, Bannon would have remembered it, and Bannon would have objected to such a meeting having taken place. The conflicting accounts provided by Bannon and Prince could not be independently clarified by reviewing their communications, because neither one was able to produce any of the messages they exchanged in the time period surrounding the Seychelles meeting. Prince's phone contained no text messages prior to March 2017, although provider records indicate that he and Bannon exchanged dozens of messages. Prince denied deleting any messages, but claimed he did not know why there were no messages on his device from before March of 2017. Bannon's devices similarly contained no messages in the relevant time period, and Bannon also stated that he did not know why messages did not appear on his device. Bannon told the office, the Mueller office, that during both the months before and after the Seychelles meeting, he regularly used his personal BlackBerry and personal email for work-related communications, including those with Prince, and he took no steps to preserve those work communications. That, by the way, is a violation of the law that the Republicans are all bent out of shape that they say Hillary violated by deleting emails. D, Kirill Dmitriev's post-election contact with Rick Gerson concerning U.S.-Russia relations. Dmitriev's contacts during the transition period were not limited to those facilitated by Nader. In approximately late November 2016, the UAE National Security Advisor introduced Dmitriev to Rick Gerson, a friend of Jared Kushner, who runs a hedge fund in New York. Gerson stated that he had no formal role in the transition and had no involvement in the Trump campaign other than the occasional casual discussions about the campaign with Kushner. Turning to page 157. After the election, Gerson assisted the transition by arranging meetings for transition officials with former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and a UAE delegation led by Crown Prince Mohammed. Oh, Crown Prince Mohammed, I earlier mentioned, I thought he was Saudi. He must be UAE. When Dmitriev and Gerson met, they principally discussed potential joint ventures between Gerson's hedge fund and RDIF. Dmitriev was interested in improved economic cooperation between the United States and Russia and asked Gerson who he should meet with in the incoming administration who would be helpful toward this goal. Gerson replied that he would try to figure out the best way to arrange appropriate introductions, but noted that confidentiality would be required because of the sensitivity of holding such meetings before the new administration took power and before cabinet nominees could be confirmed by the Senate. Gerson said he would ask Kushner and Michael Flynn who the, quote, key person or people were on the topics of reconciliation with Russia, joint security concerns, and economic matters. Dmitriev told Gerson that he had been tasked by Putin to develop and execute a reconciliation plan between the United States and Russia. He noted in a text message to Gerson that if Russia was, quote, approached with respect and willingness to understand our position, we can have major breakthroughs quickly, end quote. Gerson and Dmitriev exchanged ideas in December 2016 about what such a reconciliation plan would include. Gerson told the office that the transition team had not asked him to engage in these discussions with Dmitriev, and that he did so on his own initiative and as a private citizen. On January 9th, 2017, the same day he asked Nader whether meeting Prince would be worthwhile, Dmitriev sent his biography to Gerson. It's the Mueller Report. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here. Picking up your calls on the events of the day and of the week here. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom, your caller, Kim from Florida, is a perfect setup for my point. What she says, Democrats using the race card, is actually Democrats taking Trump's race bait. And taking Trump's race bait is the kiss of death and will lead to Democratic defeat. Donald Trump is trying to make this all about hating him, and anybody who follows him down that rat hole will lose. I'm sorry, there are many wise sayings. I'll repeat a few. One is, only an idiot argues with a fool. What's the difference? A fool is an actor and a comedian. An idiot is a stupid person who argues with that comedian and actor. How about when you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. You wrestle with hogs, you get muddy. That's what he wants, and when you get people emotionally upset, they are physiologically incapable. It's been proved psychologically. You cannot hear rationality when you're upset emotionally, as that woman was. She will never hear anything about Democratic policies when she thinks that she's being called a racist because whatever the issue is makes her feel one way or another about her views on race. And I got to tell you, Tom, Kamala Harris may have gotten a bump in her exchange with Joe Biden, but it was a colossally stupid thing to do, to bring up the issue of busing, which is almost 50 years old. And by the way, she was wrong, because what Joe Biden should have said is not, I'm sorry, I was wrong. He should have said, it wasn't only me who was against busing. Everyone was against busing. White families were against busing. Black families were against busing, and every kid was against busing. And that was the era when I was starting high school, Tom, in 1974. And this is when I got interested in politics, keeping track of what was going to happen in Milliken versus Bradley, because I was born and raised in Detroit. And my school district was one of the 53 districts that might have had to bus. So the question for me was, am I going to be able to go to Franklin High School, which was a 5-minute walk from my house, get up at 6 in the morning, and all four brothers get up, use one bathroom, get ready for school? Or was I going to have to get up at 4:30 in the morning so I could be down at Sameset High School's parking lot to get on a bus and be bused 40 miles across town? It's just a rotten, stinky thing to do to kids, and it doesn't help anybody's school. So that's the way to fix school, to shuffle kids around. And to bring this up, if she was going to continue that strategy, she's going to be going down that rat hole with Trump, and that's a loser, and it's not talking about rationality and policy that the Democrats want to talk about.
Yeah, I don't disagree that it was a cheap shot. But that, the larger question here, I think, right now, Paul, is will Trump's unhinged rants, and I think that there might be something to be said about the Palmer Report's suggestion that this is, he lost his census thing. He lost Alex Acosta. Jeffrey Epstein, now it's coming out that there are tapes and recordings and apparently Epstein, maybe it's entirely possible that a lot of his money is from blackmailing people. Is Trump among those people? That might have something to do with why Bill Barr first recused himself and then unrecused himself the next day as soon as it came out that there were the pictures. Trump had these, 3 big defeats last week. And so he goes nuts, embracing racism and xenophobia. Will the Republican Party be strengthened by this or weakened by this?
I think that to try and, say the Republicans are racist by silent consent, You notice they're not touching his racist stuff, and they're just staying away from it, because if they did, if any Republican were to say, "Hey, that's crossing the line, that's racism," he would attack them. Then he'd have them.
Oh, sure. He took down Jeff Flake. He took down. I mean, he's in the process of taking down Justin Amash. Took down Bob Corker.
And Jeff Flake, you brought those names up. So exactly, they're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, so to speak.
But he's the leader of their party.
Yeah, that's right. And they
can't escape that.
Right.
Or can they?
We can't change that. We can't change what we need to focus on what we're going to do as Democrats, not what the Republicans' problems are.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Paul, thank you. Let's see here. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, Tom, I just listening, and the whole idea about the Republicans are racist, I think, kind of...
No, that was not the assertion that I made, Tom. What I said was, and I'll say it again very quickly, is that when Nixon in '68 rolled out his Southern strategy, it was to bring white racists into the Republican Party because they didn't have enough votes to have a governing majority. And Reagan then repeated that in 1980 when the first speech he gave after he was nominated was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney were murdered, brutally murdered. The guys, the civil rights workers, they made the movie Mississippi Burning out of. And Reagan's first speech was about states' rights, just a mile from where these guys were murdered. But it was always kind of dog whistle. It was always kind of quiet. And so they were bringing racists into the party to try to expand the party. It doesn't mean the entire party's racist. It doesn't mean all Republicans are racist. And which is why I keep asking this question. Is Trump's naked racism now, as leader of the Republican Party, going to be enough to cause enough Republicans to peel off to hurt the party, or is it going to bring more people into the Republican Party as it did when Nixon was trying to do it? And Tom, it says here that you're a Republican caller. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that to me, what Trump says on his Twitter and what he does is far less important to me than the economy, what I got to pay in taxes, open borders rather than secure borders, healthcare. I mean, I'm retired and I'm going to be on Medicare next year. And when I saw the Democratic primary that second night, boy, if I had any inclination to vote for Democrats, and I voted for Obama twice, otherwise I was disappointed the second term. I can't do that. Their ideas of the economy far overarch any feelings that I have for Trump and his emails. I mean, yeah, he does some weird things, but the alternative to me is worse. I mean, he's not the greatest president in the world, and he does things that makes me cringe, but the alternative to me right now is worse. I vote with my pocketbook, and I am very, very strong about we need to control our borders and get control of our immigrants, particularly if the Democrats want to have Medicare for all, which I paid for decades before I used it, and even give it to people that aren't in this country. I think the middle and the upper middle class are going to get hammered with taxes and the inflation of this. They all talk about taxing the rich. Well, there's not enough rich money to pay for all these programs. And if you go to taxing stocks and all that, retirement for middle and upper middle class people is going to get hard too. So it's the economy that I am for, Tom.
Yeah. So, yeah, I get it, and I suspect. And I'm not, there were a couple of points you made there that I think that we could, probably go around in circles on. Like, for example, if you're sitting in a restaurant and the person sitting at the table next to you is an undocumented immigrant and they have tuberculosis and they're coughing and you're breathing their air, do you really want to deny them access to a doctor?
The whole idea, the solution to that is to make sure that he does not get in here in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And by the way, Tom, just to be clear, can you name one Democrat, in Congress, one nationally elected Democrat? There's like, nearly 300 of them, maybe more, add the Senate and the House together. One Democrat who's actually in favor of, quote, open borders?
Yes, I believe the ones that are running for president, they said that they have no idea of the wall. Once you step foot here, all you have to do is read your little asylum paper, and you're in. Now, during the Democratic
no, you're not.
debates,
you're not, Tom. You if you claim that you are a refugee, you have the right to go before a judge, and the vast majority, well over 90% of those people who go before judges, are told no, you may not be a refugee in the United States, and they get deported. It happens every single day. Obama was deporting them at the rate of 300, 1,000 a year. In fact, there was one year Obama deported over 400,000 people. Trump has not even hit 250,000 people in any given year.
Well, who are all these people in refugee camps?
We've just had, what was happening was up until about 5 years ago, most of the people coming to this country were not seeking refuge. They were seeking a better life. They were looking for work. And because Ronald Reagan stopped enforcing the law that said that if you are an employer and you hire somebody who's not here legally, you can go to jail or you can get a fine. Reagan stopped enforcing that in '86 in order to break the unions, and it did. It completely busted the construction unions. It completely busted up, or not completely, but it badly broke up the construction unions. It badly broke up, in fact, largely destroyed the meatpacking unions because non-citizen immigrant labor came in and took those jobs. This was his policy. So if you don't want people who are coming here looking for work to come here, start putting wealthy white people who employ them in jail. Number one.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. I've talked to Congress.
And you don't need a wall for that, Tom. We've had a border with Mexico for 230 years, and we've only had a wall for about 30 years. You don't need a wall if you don't have Reagan's policies.
Yeah, if E-Verify comes in on both sides and it's strong and it puts people in jail, I'd be
But here's
neither side has an appetite for that.
What the Democrats and I get what you're saying, and I really think that this is going to be very, very dangerous. This is dynamite. This is explosive and dangerous to the Democrats. What the Democrats in the debate stage were saying essentially is, if somebody is fleeing, the horrors of someplace else, we should at least treat them like, they shouldn't be 100 to a cage designed for 30 people. If you're going to lock them up, and we shouldn't be separating children from their families just to try to punish them, to cause other people to say, no, I don't want to go through that. I don't want my family to go through that. That's inhumane.
And I don't want open borders either. I think that a physical barrier.
Nobody wants open borders.
And even if we were to have a physical barrier,
we have an open border with Canada, Tom. You want to close that?
What's that?
You want to close the border with Canada?
No, they're not coming. We're not getting a lot of illegals from there because they have to,
because they have a national health care system.
What's that?
They have a national health care system. They have a better quality of life than we do.
And how many millions of Americans are fleeing there?
Well, Americans have been trying to go to Canada for a long, long time. Canada won't let them in. And because in Canada,
we should do the same thing.
And no, this is my point. This is the point I made earlier. This is, by the way, Mitt Romney's point. Canada says if you want to work in Canada, or if an employer hires somebody in Canada who's not a Canadian citizen and is not there with their equivalent of a green card, that employer can go to jail or at least face very, very large fines. And so, if as an American you go to Canada and you even try to open a bank account or rent a house, if you're not there legally, you can't do it. And
I agree.
And so, I don't have a problem with that here in the United States.
That's a whole with our politicians, yeah.
Right, but the Democrats need to fine-tune their message on this. Anyhow, Tom, thank you for the conversation.
Okay, but I just wanted to say our conversation was less certainly about racism than it was about economy and the border, and that's where I think we should focus.
I get it.
I enjoy it. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, good talking to you. Kathy in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Kathy, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. You were talking.
Hey, Kathy,
earlier.
Excuse me, Kathy. I'm sorry. I just realized that we're hitting a break right now. Let me put you on hold, and I'll pick you up on the other side of the break. I was not paying attention to my time, and I got wrapped up in that conversation with Tom. So we'll be back in just a moment. It's coming up on 48 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for We the People. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. And welcome back. Kathy, I'm sorry. You're back on.
Yeah, hi.
Okay.
I'm just kind of equating what you were talking about earlier about the attempt by very wealthy and powerful people to call a new a constitutional convention. God knows what they're going to do. Well, the Trump administration has been chipping away and chipping away and chipping away at every aspect of our government, at every aspect of human rights, and now they've got this new commission that he got Pompeo in the State Department to form the Commission on Unalienable Rights. And let me just read you this very brief clip about what it says here when they posted it in the Federal Register. They said the purpose is to provide, quote, fresh thinking about human rights discourse where such discourse has departed from our nation's founding principles of natural law and natural rights. The ACLU has a very good explanation of what's going on, and anybody knows about human rights and the law, these people do, and I'll send you the link, and I hope everybody looks at this, because when you look at what's going on, at the border, what they're trying to do with women and abortion rights, how they want to clamp down on, LGBT in every aspect of their life, this just is another way of undermining our rights. And what this commission is specifically looking at is the UN Declaration of Human Rights that was passed and codified in 1948, to which I believe we are signatory. So they're just, this is insane what's going on here, and people need to wake up, and I will send you the link to the ACLU.
Yeah. So, Kathy, by speaking of our founding principles, are they talking about slavery? They want to bring that back?
Well, I would not put anything past them. If you want to take what happened just very recently with the National Labor Relations Board, because there's the horrific sin, the original sin of slavery, of course.
Right. And by the way, it never went away. It's legal in our prison system right now. Slavery.
Exactly. There are ways that they're chipping away at workers' rights. A recent decision right out of the National Labor Relations Board have given employers virtually carte blanche to go after unions and attempt decertification, constantly put them on guard, constantly make them go through campaigns over and over and over again, constantly put workers under harassment to convince them not to retain their union.
This, by the way, was what Alex Acosta was doing.
Exactly, but now the
while we're all talking about Jeffrey Epstein,
has just recently affirmed. So it's never ending.
Yeah.
And by the way, part of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, there's also this very significant section on worker rights. So they're going after everything. There's no question.
Yeah. No, we are watching a major right-wing power play here that is going to hurt Republicans as much as anybody else. It's turning our country into something that I think is largely unrecognizable, and I have this sense of just extraordinary tragedy. Anyhow, Kathy, thank you so much for the call. We'll be back. Now it's 9 minutes, coming up on 8 minutes before the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, ThomHartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Continuing with our conversations of the day, Van in Sacramento. Hey, Van, what's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. You talked about Edmund Burke earlier. The quote was, all that's required for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing.
Yeah, and it's argued whether he actually said that or not, but it's generally attributed to him. Some people have attributed it to Voltaire. It depends on who. But anyway, yeah.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because that actually highlights an interesting argument that I think is relevant to this discussion about discourse. And that is that Burke was frequently labeled as a conservative, and that's because he was a critic of the French Revolution. And he was concerned that that if the revolution reached its eventual end state, that essentially heads were going to roll. And I think that is...
Well, that's what happened when Maximilien Robespierre took power and they rolled out the guillotines. But, Burke identified himself as a conservative.
Right.
And in fact, Russell Kirk...
Kind of revolutionary.
Yeah, well,
really?
and in Russell Kirk's 1951 book, The Conservative Mind, the opening chapter, the first chapter of that book, which lays the foundation for conservative thinking in the modern era, and this is the book that woke up Barry Goldwater, is all about Edmund Burke.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to read that. But the way that I think it relates to this discussion is because this provides sort of an argument for people to apologize for or to justify their support of Trump, because they say, well, the alternative is to vote for these revolutionaries who want to give all our tax money to the poor people of the world and so on.
Right.
And they're essentially concerned that it's the road to hell, despite good intentions. And I just want to know what you would say to these people, low information as they may be.
I would say that if you look back at the time when taxes on corporations and really rich people were the highest, they were 90% for rich people, around 45% for corporations. That was the period from 1940 basically until 1980 that we had the greatest prosperity, the greatest growth in wealth, the greatest growth among all classes across America, the greatest political stability. All this, all kinds of good stuff came out of that. And when Reagan started crashing taxes, it started to destroy all those things. Thanks for the call, Tom. Van. Pastor John in New Haven, Connecticut. Hey, John, what's up?
My good friend, Tom, keep on talking about the Southern strategy, please. Keep on talking about that. You know the book I always mention, Dog Whistle Politics, How Coded Racial Appeals Have Reinvented Racism and Wrecked the Middle Class. Donald Trump is brilliant. He is brilliant. The man is on his way to re-election, and if he wins, God bless him, because the Democrats have not followed page 18 in this book. Let me just read the first thing to you. This is by Professor E. Hanny Lopez. Let's start with an open secret. Republicans rely on racial entreaties to help win elections. In 2010, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Michael Steele, acknowledged, for the last 40 years, we have had a Southern strategy that alienated many minority voters by focusing on the white male vote in the South.
Right.
Listen, the Republicans have used race in order to win elections.
I got it. John, I got to run, but thanks. Yes, it is the Southern strategy, and it's out there nakedly. And frankly, any Republican who says, well, I'm just voting my taxes, is complicit. That's you, Tom. not me, the caller named Tom who tried to pitch that at us, and I probably should have pushed it back a lot harder. Anyhow, thanks a lot for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It needs you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.